looky here. If it ain't the competition.
I've had it up to here with all this tongue wagging about the top guns at Midas. Here, String Bean, I've heard how fast you are. Now let's see how good you are.
Satisfied?
All right, so you're good.
So's the guarantee.
But I'm warning you, Jesse. I'm going to tell every fast gun in this town where to find you.
Wish you would. It's kind of lonely at the top.
Beat the drum slowly, she carry me along, 'cause I'm an old cowboy, and I know I've done wrong. I'm an old cowhand from the Rio Grande. Yeehaw! Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the old Blake and Dion Show, Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, sponsored by Mother's Best. Remember, when you want flour, Mother's Best. Now let's get right down to it. We got here with us Jay Blake. Jay Blake, how you doing?
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We almost didn't have you, though, because we had that flood over there in Missouri County. Woo.
Got the, I don't know.
Just kept on going.
I was going to start talking about, hog showdowns, and
you were whipping some
the auction.
Hogs. You lost a lot of those steer on that auction there. Oh, but the old buttermilk stage, it just didn't. You almost missed it. Then coming over county fairs. We don't get a lot of county fairs anymore. I remember going to some county fairs, but they were more like the Italian festival or, some county fairs. The Italian festivals. But I guess, the more rural you go out west, you get a lot of county fairs.
They had one up in the Albany-ish area.
Yeah.
Outside the city. Some places get pretty rural up there.
Sure.
Outside Albany. So
yeah.
There used to be a county fair that I used to go to sometime with some friends. Good times.
Yeah, we had a county fair a couple towns over that was, in the woods. It was nice. It's fun when you're little, but then, I get little, it's like it turns into a Twilight Zone episode.
I know. I was as a kid, I was notorious for getting lost.
At the fair?
Yeah, I didn't have a leash like you did.
Yeah, my mom put a leash on. Well, that was a very short period of time. When
I would see something, jet, and then I look back, and my mom or dad, whoever I was with at the time, was like looking around, being like, "Where the hell did he go?"
And that was one of those other things in the 80s. It was instilled into us the dangers of getting lost and not talking to strangers. And I remember being in kindergarten. I remember sitting next to this kid, and this kid William was like, "Yeah, I talked to a stranger once. He offered me a glass of juice, and I drank it." I was like,
you know what? I drank it.
I was like, "Wow, William, that's crazy."
There's a scene in the new season of Glow.
Okay.
Where, I don't think this is much of a spoiler because it's more of like a gimmick. But there's like a little kid walks onto an elevator in like a hotel casino, and then the doors close. And that exact thing happened to me when I was a kid. At the time, my dad was living in.
What's the gimmick you were saying?
It's not like I'm saying it's not really a spoiler.
Oh, okay.
Nothing really happens.
Yeah.
It's no big secret. But that exact thing happened to me when I was little. But apparently I was so little that I don't even remember it. My dad was living there was a hotel in Philadelphia where half the hotel was like a hotel, and then half the hotel was like apartments,
sure.
Kind of. And they just took their eyes off me for 2 seconds.
That's all it takes.
And I just waddled onto in my diaper. Doors closed, and then like my brother and my dad were running up and downstairs looking for me. Turns out they found me like down in the kitchen.
Oh, you traveled and you got off.
Yeah, and apparently
Turned into like Baby's Day Out.
some of the kitchen workers just found me and they sat me down, and I was like, they were just like, I was eating something, and they were just sitting there with me. And
Oh, but you were into it? It wasn't like you were, like, I used to have...
I was so little that I didn't even know what was going on. Like, I don't even remember it. Like, I was in diapers. So.
Yeah, so you're literally just waddling over. I literally have, like, traumatic instances where it's like I was... like I walked away and then I became cognizant of it and like had a freak out.
Well, that happened when I got a little bit older.
Yeah,
that happened at the Franklin Institute, which was a big museum.
I think you've brought this up on the podcast before.
And when I saw something, I jolted over because it's a very interactive type museum. I mean, they have like a kids section, which is extremely interactive, but even the adult section is pretty, not adult, but. The non-child section. It's not like porno.
I need another quarter.
Anyway, so I saw something, I jolted over, and then I looked back, and I saw my parents and my brother, like, leaving the room.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then just, like, you just panic as a little kid, and then you just start crying, and luckily there's always, like, some mom.
Oh, this
comes like, are you okay?
Yeah.
And then they take you to whatever the security, where they announce.
I remember... one time in Warehouse Foods, it was a food store in New Haven where I was looking up and I thought my parents were behind me, or I guess I thought my mom was behind me. I'm looking at the toys and I was like, I want that, I want this, and I want that. And I turned around and some old guy was there. Yeah. Old to me because I was 4, but he's like, would you...
Probably like 18.
Yeah. But I remember him being older, like he had white, like, gray hair, but he's like, yeah, I'll buy you whatever you want up there, kid. And I was like, and I ran like that, Or
that's creepy.
Or like I remember another time I went with my dad. My dad would take me a lot of places. It's probably like my mom and him would get into a fight. My mom's like, you're not doing anything with him. So my dad would take me on the tasks he had to do during the day.
Oh yeah, well that was
yeah.
Still to this day, like I never want to go to like a TJ Maxx or go to a hardware store. I mean, I know like a hardware store is supposed to be like a guy thing, but I got dragged to like the hardware store. You don't have babysitters back then.
So you're just going anywhere. I remember my dad took me to his friend, was like a warehouse. He was a distributor of like bathroom tiles. So we went to like the store and my dad was talking to the guy in the office. So I wandered off. Yeah. And then next thing I know, there's a freaking Doberman like cornered me in a corner, barking like it's about to attack me. And, because it's probably the guard dog in the place. Yeah. And I'm, like, yelling at it, like, get away, get away. And they found me. They're like, what'd you walk off for? And I was like, there's a fucking dog. You're going to kill me.
I'm a little kid.
Yeah. What the fuck is
you
wrong with you?
Keep an eye on me.
I need another cigarette. Give me a cigarette. Jesus Christ, what's wrong? Tell him, Mom, you're fucked. And then lastly, I remember my mom trying to scare me. My mom told me the story of
straight?
Yeah. She told me the story of Lindbergh's baby. But she added something about it being decapitated.
She made a couple of took some liberties.
Yeah, some dramatic liberties. There was a department store called King's, which I think was in our area. It was kind of like a Caldor. Mm-hmm. It was only in New Haven. I remember being very, very young, and then after I was 5, it left the town. But we went in there, and my mom was telling me, like, like the little Lindbergh baby. They only found his head in a ditch. It was almost the end of like the. Good night, Irene. The where'd you go last night? Where'd you sleep last night? The Lead Belly song. Like they found his head in the driveway, but his body was never found in the pines. So my mom told me that, and I was like, for the rest of my life, I was like, I'm not leaving the aisle. Because remember, we talked about this in growing up at the department store where you go into the coat racks and it's like it's like The Fly. It's like those are you go into one coat rack and that's like going to that booth.
Teleported to the other side of the store.
And you come out in another coat rack and you're in the ladies department. You're like, what the fuck, ladies lingerie?
We always made jokes. You get in there and you find like other kids in there.
Yeah. There's a skeleton of some kid with like a coonskin cap on from what's his face, Davy Crockett.
He went in and never came out.
Yeah, there's another kid that's eating there and he's got like his Kiss T-shirt on and he's 5 years. He's like, who's the president? Is it still Carter? No.
What year is it?
The date. Is Nixon still in the White House? No. It's Reagan now.
Well, anyway, we got a big topic to get to.
We do, yeah.
So we should probably get on task.
Yeah, welcome to Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers.
This is Jay Blake, and that's Dion Baia.
Hi.
This is day 2 of our consecutive
sleepover. Yeah, we started this one kind of early because we got bored in the day. It's like you sleep over at a friend's house.
And then we had some Fruity Pebbles.
Yeah. Blake brought his fruity pebbles over. He had his own little. He came in his little Tupperware.
We watched some
Three Stooges.
Afternoon television.
Yeah, we watched some Pinwheel. We watched some Today's Special. Little Prince. We watched some Reboot. Inhumanoids.
Watched some of the Reboot.
Then
Pirates of Blackwater.
Then we turned on some
There's a blast from the past.
Pirates of Darkwater.
Oh yeah, Darkwater.
We watched some Thundar. Then we rounded out the morning watching some Super Friends, and then that was about, by the time that was over, it was like 3 o'clock.
Went in the pool for a little while.
Went in the pool, yeah, and then
put on our water wings, jumped in the pool.
Yeah, and then I got some terrible strafing problems on my genitalia now because I didn't wear it right. You get out, you're in the pool too long, you come out and you that's for a guy. I mean, I guess girls would have that too, but that was a guy problem. Me going up, some of the costumes I'd wear. I never had tighty Speedos, like you see. I always had like boxers, even when I wore tighty whitey as a kid, like underwear.
Kept them loose.
Yeah, I still had I had like boxer shorts as the underwater or the swimming wear.
Sure, yeah.
And I had a pool in the backyard. It's all day long. You're in the pool. You come out. You're a freaking prune, and then you're all
your skin gets soft.
Or we had the deck had that fake AstroTurf. So boy, you can get some terrible rug burn, like trying to get up and sliding off. You remember that stuff?
My dad's pool. My dad had an in-ground pool when I was little, but there was like no lining. You know how like now there's like a rubber lining
in the in-ground pool.
Yeah.
So it was what, stone? It was like
cement.
Yeah. It was just
and
they
so
dug a hole and they just filled that and let it dry.
And so there's no. So after you're in the pool for a while, you get out and your bottoms of your feet were all like scratched up.
Yeah.
Because, with the water, your skin gets very, like, soft and tender. Then
Sure.
you run around. We're playing basketball. You had, like, a hoop in
there. You're scraping your toe.
You get out and you look at the bottom of your feet.
Blood.
And they're just, like, one layer of skin away from being bloody. So then we got into, like, wearing shoes in the pool. And before they had, like the aqua sock, like waterproof shoes. My dad's like, "Here, just put on this old pair of sneakers." And we would literally like lace up old shoes,
like Keds or whatever they call them.
or like
Reeboks.
Dockers,
the deck shoes.
or like whatever was like old, and my dad didn't care if the chlorinated
but
water.
that's like you got weights,
and
tied to your feet,
or they just kind of float.
Oh yeah, so I can't get down. Our pool was uneven. It was a round pool, but it was homemade for when we bought the pool. House was built in the 40s when we moved to suburbia, and we were the second owners of the house. So the back, you've been in it. It was big and round, above ground pool, but then in the middle, it was kind of like a cone. So the middle of the pool was a little deeper than everything else. So it was like 4 feet around the center, then maybe like 5 feet or 5.5 feet right in the middle. So when I was little, that was cool, but it was always like, you walk,
slide down to
you don't realize you're going down to no man's land. So, we got a big topic today. We're back with, this is technically, we're in September, right? Mm-hmm. So we're one away from our
anniversary.
We're wrapping up. This is probably the wrap up of the summer of sequels for everyone.
Technically,
yeah.
I believe so. I mean, we're back at school. School started.
Yeah. That's why it was so hard for us. We had the 2-day sleepover because we had a lot of homework to do. So our parents, they came together and they said, you know what? Fuck it. Have them do it 2 nights back to back. We'll take the bullet because they don't have to drive it. It's only one drive over, one drive back.
Exactly.
In the Oldsmobile station wagon. So,
and this is also a sequel.
This is
but
a
in
sequel.
a non-traditional sense. It's more of a thematic sequel.
Correct. That's true. And in like almost a series. So, we're doing this week. We're going way down the alley.
Way down the alley.
Not as way down as we've gone.
We've been further down the alley.
We have, and we were further down the alley this year with Rear Window.
Rear Window.
But we're doing for a few dollars more from 1965, released in the States in 1967. Sergio Leone, Clint Eastwood, Jean-Marie Volonté, and Klaus Kinski. So
Lee Van Cleef.
My man, Lee Van Cleef, who I loved in his in the 70s and 80s, he would casually wear the open black shirts so you could see the chest hair that's become white, but then big medallions.
Yeah.
You know, he'd have those big, like, you know those ninja movies, or he had like a ninja show or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he'd be like in the black on black, kind of like the era of Delta Force. I don't know if he's in Delta Force, but
he is in Escape from New York.
Correct,
but he's not dressed like that.
No, he's
more. So this is his second appearance on the show.
This is his second, because we did
Escape from New York.
That was the season opener a couple seasons ago, 2016 or 17.
Mm-hmm. One of our finest hours.
One of our finest hours, might we say.
But so Dion is a self-proclaimed Western fan.
I am a Western fan.
Clint Eastwood aficionado.
I am a person who knows a little more than they should about Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood.
And I, though, would not categorize myself as Clint Eastwood fan. I am a fan of several of his movies, including the spaghetti westerns. So the fact that we were going to do one of these movies was inevitable at some point.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, separately, we had some listeners request The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Have we?
Yes, a couple of weeks ago. Actually, like a week before
this recording.
Before we came up with the idea to do this on the show.
Someone said, "Do the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly."
Yeah, somebody's like, "We'd really like to hear you guys do Good, Bad, and the Ugly." And I said, "Well, we're in the midst of the summer of sequels,
bruh. We're in the midst of summer of sequels."
And I said, and I even told them, I said, honestly, certainly one of the westerns, one of the Leone westerns, is inevitable. But both Dion and I favor For a Few Dollars More. So I said if we were to do one...
Out of the three.
Yeah. If we were to do one, that would probably be the first one we would tackle.
And I don't know, did we ever have this on a list of possible movies to do? Because, I like Eastwood, so I was naming a couple Eastwood movies, and you're like...
And I was like, no, fuck that shit.
Yeah, you're like, we can't do too many.
We're not doing Eastwood, yeah.
We do Carpenter all the time. You're like, Eastwood sucks, and he takes it in the pooper. What does that even mean? So we had some stuff, but I never conceived we'd even go back this far for some reason.
I don't know. I guess in my back of my head, I always kind of figured at some point
it's a good episode.
Yeah, we'd get to it. I mean, I think it's that we've only done Tombstone in terms of westerns on the show.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking of trying to figure out how to shoehorn in another western or two, and there's certainly a lot of good westerns out there that we like that could be on the show.
The little behind the scenes inside baseball for the listeners. It's can be actually tough trying to figure out what to do on the show because one, Dion's and my taste doesn't always align. Two, it's tough to figure out what. I mean, one of the early concepts of the show is that we would talk about certain type of movie. We would talk about certain movies that don't get talked about that way. And like really analyze and like celebrate it in a certain way. And of course, there's a lot of nostalgic podcasts. And so there was a lot of like unspoken rules early on that have been softened or kind of abandoned over the years. So it's tough to figure out like what constitutes something that's right for the show because some of the older movies like from the 60s, I mean clearly like our audience often, not always, is not as interested in it because they don't do as well.
Yeah.
So that's the
broader thing
my point is there's a lot of factors that we have to juggle and kind of think about when we're trying to figure out what we wanted to do.
Yeah, we've had favorites, but then we're worried about if it'll do well, and it's like, well, I've always said to that, well, you know what? Well, at least we're doing it. Maybe gradually, people it'll.
Yeah, but now it's also tough because sometimes we have advertising, and then we want a show that we have an advertiser for to do as well as possible,
sure,
so that they might want to advertise with us again. And then if
like Mother's Best Flower,
and if it just like aligns that we're doing something from like way down the alley that not a lot of people have seen or are interested in hearing us talk about, then it's like that the advertiser stuck with a show that not as many people listen to comparatively.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors, but at the end of the day, the thing that's most important is that it be a movie that at least one of us really enjoys, and that both of us think we can have a good conversation about. And so that ends up being the real deciding factor. And so, like, feel like I always kind of assumed that we would go down this alley at some point.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when.
It's the first Eastwood
Western. Because we
Western.
also spent a lot of time thinking, like, okay, we did a comedy now.
Yeah.
You know.
We don't want to be too redundant.
You know, this summer was happened to have a lot of, like, action sequels, because those were the big sequels when we were growing up. Things like RoboCop and Predator and Terminator 2.
Gremlins.
So we spent a lot of time in certain territory this summer, but for the most part, we try to like not repeat ourselves genre or theme wise, you know, in consecutive episodes as much as we can,
so we can have maybe the most broad appeal to the general audience.
So it keeps it interesting for us.
Yeah, as well. And then it was always, you know, how far do we go back? I mean, we've gone back to 1934. We've done. Have we done anything in the 40s?
I don't know if we've hit the 40s.
But we did 50s. We've done the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
So, and this was more spur of the moment, where we had something else kind of, we
were going to do something else this week, and then we decided. Dion, I think you were like...
Someone brought something up to me and asked me about it.
You're like, you know what we should have done? Summer sequels we should have done for a few days more. I was like, well, let's do it instead of that.
And I was like, but then that was the other conflict, was that we have everything mapped out to keep it easier for our sleepovers. So I was like... He's like, what do we have left? He is in Blake. And I was like, well, we only have 3 slots open. And then he was like, well, then fuck it, let's put it here. I was like, okay. So wow, that's going to be a big task. You know, like, it's a kind of a big topic, you know, but it is a fun sequel. It's one of us, and we're fans.
I would say that this is one of my favorite Westerns of all time.
Wow.
I think when we did Raiders of the Lost Ark and maybe Temple of Doom, I made the argument that, like, on any given day, I would say Raiders of the Lost Ark or Last Crusade is my favorite Indiana Jones movie. For as terms of Leone, I love Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
But they are kind of like neck and neck. Like, some days it depends on what I'm kind of mood in. I'll be like, oh, for $2 more is my best. And there's actually, you know, what we'll get into is, in my mind, they're actually very similar. And I think that's one of the reasons why.
For a few dollars more in Once Upon a Time in the West?
Yeah, like, there's, in some ways, stylistically for me, for a few dollars more is almost like the
brother.
Yeah, like the
Brothers.
prototype.
Yeah.
Of stuff that he would later do.
Yeah.
In Once Upon a Time in the West. But in terms of, you know, when I met Dion, of course, you know, like you know, we were both huge Tombstone fans, and my grandfather was very into Westerns, and so I spent a lot of time there when I was a kid before I moved up to Albany. My mom was a single mom, and so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house as my mom was working. And so I would watch, like, Bonanza with my grandfather.
Bonanza!
And back then, even though there was only 3 VHS channels and 3 VHF and UHF channels in Philadelphia. We didn't have, my grandparents didn't have cable. You'd get a lot of Westerns and stuff would be played. Especially on the weekend afternoons.
That's
and so when I met Dion, and so when I met Dion,
you were all Westerned out, right?
And he was a big fan of you know, Eastwood and the Westerns, and I'd be like, you know what, like, I've seen them all. But I was also pretty little. Yeah. I was pretty young, and they were just on television.
You were like, I'm into horror movies.
So I was just like, I've seen them all, but like in like, I can't, like, I can't tell you which one's which. Yeah. Because we'd catch them. It wasn't like, Blake, it's for $4 more is about to start.
You got to come down and sit down, and we're going to watch a few dollars more.
You know, would be on, and I'd be like, Pop, there's a Western on, and then he would.
This is a Harry Carey Jr.
You know, and then we would sit there and watch it. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of the John Wayne and the Clint Eastwood Westerns I'd seen, but I didn't know which ones were which. Later, you know, in high school, I watched Outlaw Josie Wales, specifically, like, on VHS, and High Plains Drifter, some of the later ones.
And what other you like? I know you like Unforgiven, right? What other Eastwood Westerns do you like?
I do like I like Unforgiven. I haven't seen Unforgiven in a really long time, but I did like it when it came out.
You like
I
Josie
like
Wales
High
or
Plains Drifter.
High Plains Drifter, Joe Kidd or Pale Rider.
I'm
you know
not
them?
as crazy about Outlaw Josie Wales as most people, but I certainly don't dislike it.
Yeah.
I just it's as far as the Eastwood westerns, it's basically like the Leone ones and High Plains Drifter are my favorites.
Yeah.
And I liked Unforgiven when it came out, but it's been at least 10 years since I watched Unforgiven, probably more. It's actually one that over the years, I've been like, I really want to watch Unforgiven, and then you look at all the fucking streaming networks that you're paying for, and it's never on any of that.
I know, yeah.
And it's like, do I really want to buy Unforgiven? I really just want to watch Unforgiven, and then if I like it, maybe I'll buy it. But I haven't seen it, so and so I've been wanting to watch Unforgiven at various points over the years, but just can never find it. Yeah, so I've just never. So it's never been watched. But the Leone westerns have been watched many times.
I remember when you in college, because you were getting into you horror and all that kind of stuff. You
But I was also getting into the Italian exploitation.
Yeah,
and so partially from your interest, and then also my budding interest in Italian exploitation movie. That was. Like I revisited them all.
Yeah, I remember post college, you were the first person I knew that got that Man Without a Name trilogy box set, and I was like, ooh, because I still had them on VHS or just the individual DVDs. So, and then I remember you got back into them then, and then that's when we had the conversation for about $3 more, because we were talking about westerns or Leone or Eastwood, and. I'd always make the case. So I like all three of them.
Yeah, I like them all too. But oddly enough, Good, Bad, the Ugly is probably my least favorite of the three.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Fistful of Dollars is great. Good and the Bad, the Ugly for me is great too. But for me, that's a little long.
Yeah.
And then you always hear the first and the third talked about. Yeah. The first is so groundbreaking. The third is so amazing. It's like the best one aside from Once Upon a Time in the West. Maybe there's arguments that it's better than it.
I would say there are people
that think that's the quintessence.
Yeah, maybe because they're just not as familiar. In some cases, I think maybe they're just not as familiar with Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean to say that if they saw Once Upon a Time, they would think it was better.
Yeah.
But I think people are like, this is my favorite, this is the best one. And it's mostly sometimes because they just are not familiar with the other one.
Yeah.
Or they just have a certain nostalgia because that's the one that turned them on to it.
And this would always be, and they did for $3 more. And then when I got into Eastwood specifically, my father luckily was buying all these, so we had a lot of Eastwood-owned movies. Surprisingly, I guess we just had westerns. And I was the one who probably bought, when I got into them, some other stuff or rented them. But we had Fistful of Dollars. We had For a Few Dollars More. We never had The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We had Hang 'em High. And then we had Outlaw Josie Wales and maybe High Plains Drifter. And I forget who it was. Maybe it was like a MGM. When MGM bought Universal Artists, United Artists.
Yeah.
It was one of those kind of deals. So the box was always, for the two of these, were so awesome looking. It was like these stylized drawings of, like, the first one was with Eastwood, like, looking at the camera with the gun up by his head, like looking at you like a Punisher pose. Yeah. And then the second one, For a Few Dollars More, which I fell in love with, and it's one of my favorite Western posters, is that iconic. It was drawn, but I think it was from a movie poster. But it's him at the end of the movie holding the Winchester rifle, and then in the other hand holding the watch. Mm-hmm. With the poncho on. It's like that iconic where the barrel of the rifle's going way out.
Sure,
and that was the cover of it. I'm like, these look awesome. Probably because too I was, he kind of looked to me like the artist text drew the Punisher, So I was like, this guy, So when I got into the Eastwood and his westerns, I drifted to these two, and then this one specifically because I just loved the story and I thought it was so classic, even a little more than Fistful of Dollars. Because for me, I used to get, as a young person, I get a little bored in the middle of Fistful of Dollars. You know what I mean? Like with the setup and him bouncing, the whole elements you see in Yojimbo or Red Harvest, where he's bouncing between the families and all that. This, to me, For a Few Dollars More, was always much more fast-paced, fun, elements of cinema,
When I rewatched A Fistful of Dollars in college, or just post-college, or towards the end of college, it was a summertime.
Yeah.
Because I was visiting my mom. And there was nothing to do there, so I just watched movies. And so we've talked about on the show before, I'm sure, where sometimes I watch a movie and it's a movie that makes me want to make movies.
Yeah.
And I talked about how it's usually a movie that's usually kind of low budget, but they achieve so much, and it's just so awesome, and it's kind of very inspiring. And for me, when I rewatched A Fistful of Dollars, that was definitely the case. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, I want to go out and make a fucking movie.
Yeah.
Like, look at this. This is awesome. And then I think through conversation, maybe you were like, oh, my favorite of the series is For a Few Dollars More, and then I revisited that, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think you were definitely the first one to be like, this is my favorite of them.
And his biographer, in researching this, feels that it's
turns out that
Eastwood's biographer that he thinks this is the best because it's a little more on point and action packed than the first one, and it's condensed. It's not as big as the third one.
Yeah, there's a lot. I have very specific thoughts about why. But I would love to set the table a little bit about spaghetti westerns, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'll try to make it as concise as possible.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and we talked about some of this stuff in terms of the way the Italian film business worked in the 60s and the 70s in some of our giallo Italian, like Deep Red and Suspiria, some of our Italian like horror movies. But it's an interesting. The Italian film industry is fascinating to me, and I actually, even in researching for this, I learned even more about it than I knew before. It's important to put certain things in context. The French New Wave, for instance, was kind of started. Inspired by Hollywood because of post-World War II. During World War II, the French didn't get any of the American films. They weren't exported to Europe during World War II. So post-World War II, a lot of the American films and literature and stuff started to hit Europe.
And they were seeing stuff that was maybe 5 or 6 years old by this point.
Yeah, that's why they got obsessed with like film noir after...
Because they were seeing it all for the first time.
Not that film noir was ever a craze in America. They were B pictures.
Yeah.
Thought of as B pictures. But then some of these Europeans saw these films after the fact.
In the late 40s.
And they were like, wow, a lot of these are special. And they became obsessed with Hitchcock, who Hitchcock was special here, too, during the time.
And they'd just been through a war, too, so it definitely refined. We can get into how that even affected all this post. Yeah.
So the... same thing happened with Italy, but Italy was kind of even worse because, even for 20 years, for decades before World War II, it was a fascist country. So a lot of the American film and stuff was just being kept away by Mussolini and stuff. So it wasn't until it was post-World War II that all of a sudden all these American films, once, Italy had established itself as a republic, all these American films and literature came to America. Now, it's very important. Came to Italy, and it's important because the people of Leone's generation, when that started to happen, were like in their teens and early 20s, which, at least for me, was my most formative years of film viewing and music and stuff. And so that was really important as to why then they would go and try to do something like a Western 10, 15 years later. Also, post-World War II in the 50s and 60s, there was a big economic boom in northern Italy. Not so much in mid-Italy and southern Italy, but in northern Italy, there was this big economic boom. And the thing that I didn't realize until now is that there really was a divide in the film industry of in Italy, of northern Italy and southern Italy. And so you get people like Fellini and Antonioni and Visconti. They were all northern Italian filmmakers. So a lot of like the artier Italian cinema is coming out of northern Italy, and they actually looked down upon what was going on in southern Italy.
Yeah, and then if you look at regionally, up north is where Milan is. That was the fashion capital. Up there you have like Venice and Rome, and then as you go south, you get Florence.
Rome is like mid-Italy, and that's where the divide starts to happen.
Yeah.
Because then you get people like...
And south of that is like Naples, I think. Right?
Yeah, Naples is even further south. So
Pisa.
Leone was, he was born and was from Rome, but his family was from Naples. But guys like, so you get people...
I'm from Naples too.
People like... so you get like Leone and then Fulci at the time, later Argento, who was a little bit younger. They're all from like Rome. So they're coming from a different type of Italian cinema than people like Fellini and Antonioni were, which is more of the exploitative Italian cinemas being made in Rome.
And also in the 50s as well, the sword and sandal epics are huge.
Well, that's, yeah.
You know, so that was a huge influence.
Because what happens is...
The big art epics.
Where you start to get find something that was successful and redo the shit out of it until it's dead. Starts kind of with these Hercules sword and sandal films in the late 50s into the mid 60s.
You get like Hollywood productions going on location sometimes to Italy in the mid 50s, and they're doing these pictures, and then a lot of people like Leone and stuff work on these pictures, and then they get a handle, like you're saying, like, hey, we could be doing this on our own here. And maybe Barabbas is an example of a cross promotion, but you get a lot of these where then American actors start working over there too and doing stuff.
And Leone worked as an assistant director on many films before branching out on his own. His first full directing credit is one of these sword and sandal films called The Colossus of Rhodes from 1961.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he only made 7 films as a director.
Leone.
Yeah, but he worked as an assistant director for a long time. Now, you pair what's going on with, this influx of American film combined with the North and South divide and stuff that we've talked about in our more Italian horror movie aspects, is that Italy was also very much a movie culture.
Sure.
They originally got television like much earlier, but then when World War II started, like all transmissions were halted. And so they didn't actually get television again until 1954. And then even then, there was like one public Italian station.
Yeah, with World War II, the first image that's broadcast is Hitler at the Olympics in 1936, I think, which is in that movie, Jodie Foster, Hagen, Carl Sagan, Contact. Mm-hmm. And then TV's going until the war sets in, and then everyone abandons television for the war years, and everything is put on hiatus, really, except the film industry in America. But we don't even make cars in America because everything is turned into like plants to build bombers and tanks. So at the end of the war in the 40s, then we go back to TV and we start doing TV, and and then that's why TV becomes really a mainstay by the end of the 40s into the 50s. Here in the early 50s, it becomes a huge phenomenon, and then that's what you're saying. By the mid-50s,
Italy
it's reintroduced into Europe.
Yeah, Italy didn't really homes didn't get televisions until the mid to the late 50s, but then they only had like one public Italian station. They didn't start getting private channels until the 70s.
Yeah.
And so even though there were popular television shows, Italy remained a very movie centric culture in that every small town had at least one movie theater.
And as a side note, we talked about this sort of when we did Profondo Rosso.
Yeah,
Deep Red, Argento. We talked about the beginnings of Giallo and this about
and
what
how
goes
the exploitation cinema that Italy was putting out was very much, one, geared to an international audience, but two, geared towards this movie culture of going to a movie as a social thing.
Yeah. And
not necessarily going to watch the movie, but like, I'll meet Dion at the movies and we'll catch up. We'll talk.
Have a glass of wine.
And then every 10, 15 minutes, you need something outrageous to happen to draw our attention back to the screen because everybody's just talking.
So to be an action,
it was like, it was like
sex.
Let's go to a club and catch up. People would go to the movies, and it was a very social event.
Yeah.
And because they weren't necessarily sitting around watching TV, they did this, throughout the week. And so some towns had 3 movie theaters. And so Italy needed to they weren't necessarily getting all the American pictures for all of these smaller towns. So Italy needed an industry to fill those movie houses with stuff.
There was a demand.
And so they started pumping out a lot of these like lower budget exploitation
and
films.
I think pretty early on, whoever it was to take credit for this gets the idea, if we can do maybe international co-productions with different countries, and then we can allure a lead from Germany, from England, from America over, we can then do the movie, and then when we shop it around, if Ernest Borgnine's in it, American audiences will recognize him. If Donald Pleasance is in it, English audiences will recognize him. If Klaus Kinski's in it, German, so they know that that's a marketing tool when they go to,
because ultimately, they were catering to an Italian audience, but they knew that the money was international sales.
Yeah.
And so to amplify their chances at international success, they were like, we'll put actors from every country. This is also where the idea of not recording production sound comes into play, because you literally have actors that don't speak the same language talking to each other on screen.
And this is funny enough, all covered in the latest Quentin Tarantino movie of this record, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But you do they end up shooting stuff MOS, mid-out sound, which is much cheaper because you're not having to record, so you don't have to worry about a plane going overhead or this or that, or all you have to do is just record silently, and that's a whole other issue of why, because people do know that cameras don't record sound back then.
Yeah, you'd have a separate sound system, and then you'd have to sync them up
later on. So this was cost-effective
you
as
get
well.
stories like when we talked about Suspiria, of like, when we covered Suspiria, Jessica Harper, who's the star of Suspiria, talking about like she being in a scene with a woman who speaks German, a woman who speaks Italian, a woman who speaks French. And then when they marketed those films to those countries, that was who was at the top of the marquee.
Whoever that is. Hey, but then you'd have these, and that's we might have talked about that in Suspiria, but Eastwood would say this too. It's like you really had to know your lines, because you're doing a scene, and Blake speaks Italian. I'm delivering my lines in English. Blake's replying to me in his native language, and then that's the end of the scene. And then the director and all the crew speak another language, and it's like, okay, got.
Now, in terms of westerns, there's a figure that up until 1960, roughly 40% of all Hollywood films made were westerns.
I'd like to get into Hollywood westerns a bit and TV westerns, but let's keep going with what you're saying.
But then because. This is a good place if you have stuff to add to it, because one of the reasons why Western production for American cinema started to slow down was because of television.
You have up until post-war, you're getting a lot of Westerns. Prior to World War II, we've talked about how movies were a little more, didn't have the sting of, I'd say, after war, and you get a lot of the film noir themes and all that kind of a thing. The soldiers coming back and seeing the horrors of war, and that affects what their output in music and also in cinema. So in the 50s, you get this great series of films. It's kind of like, if you look at it like, with Edgar Allan Poe creating The Detective in Murder in the Rue Morgue. That's pre-World War II. And then you have in the 50s, in the late 40s and the 50s, you start having these psychological westerns. So we can say that's like England taking Sherlock Holmes and Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie taking it to England and doing the detective over there. In the 50s, you have these psychological westerns where they're much more deep, and they're dealing with issues of. There's a great run of Jimmy Stewart, Anthony Mann movies where it's very psychological. They're talking about, you steal from me, you do this, that. They get very dimensional, as opposed to back in the old days, it was good guy was in white, bad guy was in black, say. And then in the 50s, up until 1952 on TV, they only really had the Lone Ranger and the Gene Autry show, which were the only westerns on television, but they were catering really to kids. So in 1955, Gunsmoke drops, and Gunsmoke runs until 1975. So you think about that's a 20-year run. I think it was only just beaten, some years ago by The Simpsons, of being the longest running show of all time.
Sure.
That's going through multi-generations. And that becomes, that airs on a Saturday night, and it's geared towards adults. And it's because of the popularity of these psychological westerns, they start saying, we can do a TV show like this. So by 1956, you get Cheyenne comes out. That's huge, and that leads into 57 of shows like Have Gun Will Travel, Maverick, Wagon Train, The Restless Gun. And then in 58, you get Wanted Dead or Alive comes out with Steve McQueen, which is kind of the first time where you have a character. He plays a bounty hunter, Josh Randall, on the show. But that's the first time you get a character in a TV show where he's not really a good, he's a bounty hunter. So he could be an anti-hero, he could be a questionable means. It's not like he's a sheriff or a marshal or a ranch hand.
He's not necessarily, he might have a code, but he's not necessarily as worried with the morality of things.
Exactly. And that's, breaking new ground. Along with that, you also get The Rifleman comes out. And then around that time in 58, you get this huge scandal, which ends up having House of Representatives subcommittee hearings about the game shows that are taped live in New York City, the big money that they come to find out they were rigged. There's a movie called Quiz Show, I think, that's about that.
Yeah, Robert Redford directed it.
Yeah, and John Turturro's in it, maybe
Rob Morrow and Ray Fiennes.
Ray Fiennes, right? And that's all about how it's a very interesting story. But because of that, TV, they dump more money into Westerns because they're so popular. So then in 59, you get Rawhide and Bonanza come out. And those go into the 60s, and then literally the only things that really end up surviving through the Vietnam years and all the turbulent 60s are the established worlds of settled places, which is basically Bonanza, which is the Ponderosa, and then what did I just say? Gunsmoke, which is Dodge City.
Yeah.
So at that time, you have all these kind of people coming out and breaking out on TV, which that was another conversation we can get into, but you have James Gardner coming out in 57 in Maverick. 58, you get McQueen coming out in Wanted Dead or Alive, and then 59, you get Eastwood doing Rawhide. But it's a great way of it's hugely popular. At the prime, there's like at least 35 TV shows, Westerns on TV, and then that's not counting
Plus,
radio.
I was going to say there's the Westerns were big in the radio, things like The Lone Ranger, and they were big in comic books. There were Western comic books.
You had Sing Along, the Singing Cowboy. You had all those people, doing kinds of stuff. So it was a very popular genre in the 50s. And then it's, with the big budget epics of the Sword and Sandal movies going into the late 50s, there is an idea where people start to get kind of tired of the psychological Westerns. And that's why I equated it before to Edgar Allan Poe and the Detectives. When you get Dashiell Hammett in the late 20s grabbing and doing maybe Red Harvest or his early stuff there, which ends up also being the Maltese Falcon, Raymond Chandler, who's also a very famous film noir author, he wrote an essay called The Simple Art of Murder, I think it's called, and he's talking about Dashiell Hammett, and he says Dashiell Hammett gave you a reason back to have a murder, except just to having it in a room for people to solve. And in the late 50s, if this is too roundabout way, people were getting sick of the psychological Western. It was a little too, complicated, these really deep shows, every week where it's like, some crazy catastrophe will happen, then everything will be okay at the end. So there was kind of a push to make a little more simple Westerns. Get back to what, the simplicity, the good and the bad,
not so much the ugly.
yeah, exactly. The uncomplicated, the violent people, the motivations, the glorification that really made it so iconic, the genre. So you do get two movies that are very influential to the spaghetti Westerns, which is a movie called Veracruz from 1954 with, I think, Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster, but the cinematography and how they shoot the stuff is kind of, Leone says, was very influential to him. And then in I think it's 58 or 60, you get a movie called One-Eyed Jack, which is a Marlon Brando movie, which I also think he directed. And that also, it's like his outfits, it's very dirty, it's very, it's something people really haven't seen before. And then along with the John Ford stuff, particularly The Searchers, you get this idea now going back to Blake where it's like the West, the people are going to start making this as a exploitative genre, and just make it. Hey, let's stop not the convolutedness, but all the other kind of like thinking man, like Blake saying, if these Italian guys are going to Italian people are going to the cinema, they really got to pay attention to some of these, Winchester 73 or the Bend in the River or Red River, as opposed to some of these earlier movies where it's very simple. The plots are just, this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get back to the pure essentials of it.
Now, part of, what leads to the Italians, Leone making a Western, is that there were Westerns in Europe. Italy had actually made some Western comedies earlier in the 40s and into the 50s. One's called The Boy in the West from 43, The Sheriff in 1959. So Westerns were being made. Then in 58, there were some non-comedic Westerns, like The Sheriff of Factor Draw. But kind of the most important aspect of the spaghetti Western was that actually Germany started making Westerns, because there was a German writer named Karl May who was alive from 1842 to 1912, and he wrote novels that took place in the American Old West. And most specifically, Germany was making movies based on his books that were about a Native American and Apache hero named Winnetow. And so in the 60s, they started making these movies based on the Karl May books, like Treasure of the Silver Lake in 62, Apache Gold in 63.
Ooh, Apache Gold.
Old Shatterhead, a.k.a. Apache's Last Battle in 1964. And they made a shitload of these movies from like 63 to 65. Now, why this is important is because those movies were popular not just in Germany, but in Europe in general, which made the Italian film industry say, oh, if these movies are popular, maybe on Western is a viable genre for us to explore.
One-Eyed Jack, Marlon Brando, 1961. Sorry.
One of those Westerns, for instance, the American title is Gunfight at the Red Sands, which is a 1963 non-comedic Italian Western. But before Fistful of Dollars, even had music by Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, who ends up collaborating with Leone here because they're old, I guess, classmates from school. They went to school together growing up.
And also there was another one called Magnificent 3, obviously. Not the Magnificent 7.
Well, even the
Gunfight at High Noon.
Fistful of Dollars' first title was The Magnificent Stranger, and we can get into that later, but when Eastwood went and did this and then came back, like almost a year went by, and then he hadn't heard anything about it, and he was sitting there still doing Rawhide, as basically just a TV star, and he's reading the Variety, and it says, like, this movie, The Fistful of Dollars, is taking Europe by storm. He's like, wow, it sounds really good. And
yeah, he didn't even know it was his movie.
Yeah, and then he realizes, the American star Clint Eastwood is now the greatest star in Europe, and he's like, it's me. He's like, what the fuck, And even Sophie Loren comes over in the early 60s, and she first comes to Hollywood, and she's like, can I go meet the star of Europe? And they're like, who? And they're like, Clint Eastwood. And they're like, Clint Eastwood? They're like, you mean the Roddy Yates from fucking, Rawhide? And she's like, yep, that's the one.
Well, I mean, basically the next step is that Leone makes Fistful of Dollars. And of course, that's not the movie we're doing today, but there are important factors because it's the first one.
Sure.
One, Dion obviously can talk about this in greater detail than I can, but part of it is, just kind of stars align in terms of they wanted a Hollywood star, but they couldn't get people like Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson and Lee Marvin. Although Lee Marvin almost did it, but ended up doing another movie instead.
Yeah, or Lee Marvin got offered this picture for $50 more, but he was doing Cat's Baloo, and he couldn't do this. They might have offered Charles Bronson, James Colburn, a couple people, and they all passed on Fistful of Dollars.
Because nobody knew who Leone was, and they didn't know what the movie was.
And the only reason Eastwood's trajectory in this is that he starts doing Rawhide, and, Eastwood's born 1930. He grows up in California. He bums around. He's one of these kids, and it's interesting because you think about like like James Dean's upbringing or Steve McQueen's upbringing, where they were kind of a loner. Where his father, they traveled with his dad for work during the Depression, so he was in like 10 different schools till when he was the age 10. So he was kind of the loner, shy guy because of, he couldn't make friends long because they were moving. So by the time he graduates in 1948, he does odd jobs like everyone else at the time. He's like cutting trees down. He's in a steel mill. He's driving a truck. He's fighting fires in the national forests. He gets drafted into the war in 1950, but he doesn't go to Korea. He ends up staying stateside, and he becomes a lifeguard. He's actually in an accident where he's in a bomber plane, and him and his friend, who's a pilot, took it, and they were flying down to San Francisco for shore leave, and the plane, supposedly the story is the plane kind of runs out of gas or loses altitude, and they have to ditch in the ocean, and they're all right, but then they have to swim back, and he's like, he almost died. Very crazy. So he gets out. He also, at this time, his army mates are two people we've actually brought up in the last 2 episodes, funny enough, because we go all around the river, so to speak, where last week we brought up in, what did we do last week? We did Predator 2. We brought up Adam 12. The guy, Kent McCord, was in Predator 2. His partner on Adam 12 is Martin Milner. He is one of Eastwood's old friends from the Army. And then 2 episodes ago, we brought up, on Evil Dead 2, we were talking about shooting in high school gyms, and I brought up a movie called Avalanche, which was a TV movie starring David Jansen, the guy from The Fugitive.
Yeah.
He's the other guy that was friends with Eastwood in the Army at the time. He's bunking with these guys, and they're like, what do you want to do with your life? He goes, I don't know. He's like, why don't you try acting like we're doing? He's like, I don't know. And then he realizes he needs money. He just got married. He needs to support his family. His wife, at the time, gets very sick, almost dies of hepatitis. So he's running out of dough. He's like, okay, I'll try acting. He goes, gets a job at Universal as a day player. But it's still the old studio system. So you get hired and you're just doing extra work. And you're doing, shitty little movies. He makes his debut in the horror movie The Return of the Creature. He does Tarantula. He's the bomber pilot that kills the big spider at the end. But in 1956, Universal drops him the same day they drop Burt Reynolds. They're both friends, Eastwood and Reynolds, and they tell Eastwood and Burt that they'll never make it in Hollywood, and that the reason they drop Eastwood is because they think his Adam's apple's too big, and his profile shots. He's like, oh, what the fuck? So he still bums around he goes to RKO, does a couple movies. Finally, serendipitously, he's having lunch at some CBS lot, and some producer sees him, and they're looking at, there was a John Wayne Western with Montgomery Clift called Red River from like the late maybe 1948. They want to make a show called Rawhide about it. And they're looking for a young guy to play opposite the more experienced guy. So they're like, Eastwood, you look great. Why don't we hire you? He's like, sure. He becomes Rowdy Yates.
Mm-hmm. But because he had a television contract.
Yes. He couldn't do, that's why. I said all this to get here. So by the time Eastwood gets Rawhide, Eastwood's almost 30. And he's playing 10 years younger. He's playing this young guy who's like, funny and experienced, the good-looking guy. So he starts doing this for, Rawhide's on for 6 years. It goes from 1959 to 1966. And I think it's the last show either on TV or on that network that's shot still in black and white. But Eastwood starts getting bored because it's like, he's playing the same thing every week. He's playing this guy who's a bumbling, so he wants to do other stuff. He wants to strike out and do some stuff. But his contracts, they won't let him get out and go do movies. And he's like, what the hell? And
he can't make movies in America.
Yeah. And during his breaks, he has time. He can go do something on the side. And people have, prior to this, gone to Italy and done maybe Telly Savalas. I forget who, but I watched a movie in the last year that predated Fistful of Dollars. And I was like, oh, wow, look, it's an American actor doing something big in Italy. Can't remember now what it was. But he gets his agent calls and says, hey, do you want to do something in Italy, shoot something? And Eastwood's like, well, already Charles Bronson's passed on it. And what do we say? James Coburn maybe's passed on it. And Eastwood reads the script, and the only reason that he really hangs on to it, one, it could be he's never been to Europe. It could be a good vacation for him and his wife, all expense paid. If the movie ends up bombing, no one in America will ever see it because it'll just stay in Europe and it'll be forgettable, and they'll get a good vacation out of it. Two, Eastwood's a fan of jazz music, the arts and stuff. He's an accomplished piano player. He liked artful films, and he was familiar with Kurosawa, who had done Yojimbo in 1961, and he knew that Yojimbo's earlier movie, which was The Seven Samurai, was remade into The Magnificent Seven.
Kurosawa's earlier movie.
Kurosawa's earlier movie was remade into Seven Samurai, which became The Magnificent Seven, and that gave Steve McQueen his start. that gave James Coburn his start, Charlie Bronson, kind of. So he's like, if this script he's reading at the time, Fistful of Dollars, which was called The Magnificent Stranger, is based on Yojimbo Kurosawa, that might not be a bad thing.
He was going to be the Magnificent Stranger.
Yeah,
and he was the title role,
and that's based off of
like this was his first starring role in a movie,
and he's not being this clear-cut kid, this bumbling or not absent-minded, but just young naive kid. He can be he can invent his own character himself. He was familiar with Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest that Yojimbo is based on, which ends up being they make a couple movies of that, but you like
Last Man Standing.
You like Last Man Standing by Walter Hill. That's probably the most faithful of that Red Harvest adaptation. So he's like, what the hell? I can buy my own outfits. He goes and he realizes when he gets to Italy for Fistful of Dollars that he's probably the most experienced Westerner, a Hollywood Westerner on set. So they actually use him as kind of a technical advisor how to do stuff. And Leone likes him because he's got a great striking figure. He's really good looking, but he's almost worried he's too much of a pretty boy, so he says we'll just give him like a beard, 5 o'clock shadow, dirty him up a lot. And the big thing is, too, he wants him to have those cheap cigars. And Eastwood doesn't smoke, but he's like, we want you to have cigars. So in the airport on the way to Spain, Eastwood buys these cigarellos, cuts them in half, and then that becomes his trademark when he flips it from one side of the mouth to the other. So Eastwood goes getting paid $5,000 for 4 weeks of. He's like, shit, what the hell? I need the money.
It was that first movie was
64,
but it was also reportedly a $200,000 budget or $250,000 budget, depending on where what information you read. It's funny to hear him talk about how the difference. He liked Leone. Leone was funny. Was smart, even though they couldn't really communicate language-wise. But he's like, and he liked to eat. Yeah. And so, like, when they take lunch in Hollywood, you eat for like a half hour, maybe hour tops. You would break. In Italy, they would break for like 2 hours, drink wine. It was like a whole thing
really
in the
relaxed.
Middle of the day. And he's like, but the only problem, he was like, it was great, but the only problem was then getting back in the mode to work. It took a ramp up. You were like working in slow motion for a couple hours after lunch. Now, Dion kind of talked a little bit about how you start to see this like prototype of the anti-hero happening in American television. People point to these spaghetti westerns as like the real introduction of the anti-hero and like the birth of the modern action hero. And part of what's important is also going on in the 60s is, not just with America in Vietnam, but the 60s is just in a lot of ways a turbulent time worldwide. In the late 50s, you get like the Cuban Revolution, and then you get Che Guevara into the 60s. Obviously, the Cold War is happening.
Castro.
Yeah, you get the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis in the earlier 60s. And
Kennedy's assassinated in 63, which kind of is the end of that Eisenhower era into the 60s, and then with, like you're saying, Vietnam into the civil rights movement.
But stuff's also happening in Italy in terms of there's just kind of like social and political unrest. Into the late 60s, there starts to be, protests and even terrorist bombings and stuff. But, even though that's after these movies are made, obviously there's a period of time that's leading up to that.
Yeah.
And so part of the success of the Eastwood anti-hero character that then spawned Django and all these other westerns. I mean, basically westerns were this huge thing for basically 10 years, all based around this kind of anti-hero figure who is not necessarily preoccupied with what's right and what's wrong. They might have a code that they go by, but, for a few dollars more, which is the movie we're actually covering today, they're bounty hunters, bounty killers.
It's also an interesting perception of how Europeans look at the American, where Eastwood thought when he went to do Fistful of Dollars, he's like, he never thought that the picture would play over in America, because he never thought in the 1963 or 64 when he went and shot it, that character would be believable, that anti-hero, because it was so opposite of what he's playing on TV and what's really happening. They hadn't got there yet. And that's part of the reason why when these movies finally come out, he shoots this 64 Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More 65, 66 is Good, Bad, and the Ugly. They don't come out over here because there's a lawsuit with Yojimbo copyright issues until 67. United Artists ends up putting them out, and they put them out within a year of each other. So you can imagine all three of these movies come out within 1 year, and it catapults Eastwood because, with Blake saying, the Vietnam War, there's the turbulent times. Suddenly there's this anti-hero on TV. It's for American audiences, it's people they grew up with watching this clean-cut person, Rowdy Yates, who's now suddenly very different. He's in a poncho, he's got a beard, he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. In Italy, it's kind of like the perception of the American. He comes in, he's effing some shit up, and he's leaving, and that's the end of it. You know what I mean? So
it's just like the stereotypical Western hero.
Yeah.
The cowboy in the white hat was not going to resonate with Italy or the world, really. But the reason why they didn't go that route is because they knew Italian audiences were not going to buy it. They needed... It was also a little bit of escapism. It was a little bit of vicarious, living through the characters.
Sure.
The world was in turmoil. They needed someone who didn't give a shit.
And it's also very much
connect with
what you got in France in the late 40s with the Philip Marlowe, the private detective, the cop, what you see in film noir, that character, the guy who has a moral code, but he does dirty things, the Humphrey Bogart kind of a guy, or where he's very easily he'll kill somebody. But at the end of the day, he does have a morality. He will, like Mickey Spillane, the jury, spoiler at the end, he will turn his girlfriend in, who he's been banging because he knows she did it, even though she's like, please save me. He's like, no, it's wrong. So in Fistful of Dollars, as corrupt as the Eastwood character seems because he's playing both sides, there is a morality there because at the end of the day he does save there's a heroine in it.
Yeah.
So there is a moral code that people do enjoy and they can identify with.
It's not as clean.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not as clear.
Yeah.
It's not as black and white.
And it's not as complicated as those earlier 50s, they're
not
really
as
masterpieces.
psychological.
Yeah, they're not dealing with you killed my brother or, this land or that. It's and all the emergence of the West and the killing of the Indian and all that stuff that people were finally starting to face in the 50s.
Now, one of the interesting things going back to the Italian film industry is, and maybe there is a little bit of this in that, originally Leone for Fistful of Dollars is credited as Bob Robertson. There's this Americanization of Italian names in some of these films that are going international. Now, there might be a little bit of trying to appeal to an American audience, but it's actually more about it's not as much about fooling an American audience as it is about fooling the Italian audience.
Oh, so they think it's
wanting the Italians in these little towns and all these little movie theaters all across the country to think that they're getting an American imported film starring this American star. And this isn't necessarily an Italian-made movie. And
it's another, if you watch, I recently revisited Toshiro Mifune's performances in the Yojimbo and Sanjiro and some of those. If you look at him, it's very much that anti-hero. Yeah. Eastwood's performance is very taking cues from in my personal opinion, of Mifune, of that era.
But it's fascinating because Kurosawa, in a lot of ways, is inspired by the American Western.
Hence why Yojimbo is a remake of Red Harvest, which isn't a Western, but it's an American concept. So then they end up remaking it. So, yeah, the Seven Samurai and those movies are kind of loosely based on the iconic Westerner American hero, taking it into their feudal Japan.
And then the Italians take the samurai movies,
Magnificent Seven,
or the Americans even, and then kind of repurpose it again as an American icon.
That story, so it kind of all feeds into itself. So
we get the anti-hero prototype again, kind of the modern action hero. It's not as clear cut and dry, good and bad. Sometimes there's other things going on as a hero, and then as successful,
he becomes a cult hero in Italy. And then he becomes this huge icon in Europe. And for a few dollars more, by the time that comes out in Italy, there's a fact or a quote that says that up until for a few dollars more becomes the biggest money-making movie in Italy of all time, foreign and domestic.
From 1965 to like 1970 or 71, For a Few Dollars More is the most financially successful movie that Italy ever made.
Including stuff, even brought in or stuff that they've made domestically.
Which is a huge factor, because as important as A Fistful of Dollars was, with jump-starting what became the spaghetti western genre, in a lot of ways, For a Few Dollars More is the more important film.
At least to us.
Well,
yeah.
Because its success was really, like, it was more successful. So its success really said this is a viable thing. It was that movie, the success of that movie that was like, okay, let's put out Django, let's put all these other movies, and they started really churning them out because of that movie. And For a Few Dollars More is also where, like, Leone's style and trademark stuff really starts to come into effect.
Yeah.
So now that we've set the table, and we only have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Good night, everybody. We're seeing you soon.
Let's finally jump into this masterpiece.
One last point before we leave the other stuff. We brought up Wagon Train, Ward Bond many times when we talked about Star Trek, because that was the prototype of Star Trek, or what Gene Roddenberry was kind of talking about with the original Star Trek. And then we brought up on, I think it was we did Them, the horror movie, sci-fi movie from the 50s. We were talking about James Arness in that, because they wanted first John Wayne as the Gunsmoke, but John Wayne said, no, I'll recommend you James Arness, and he got into Gunsmoke. And I think we brought that up because James Arness was in Them when we covered Them. So this is kind of stuff we have talked about a couple times in the past. 1965, For a Few Dollars More. Good night, everybody. Be seeing you soon.
Well, there's some important...
well, you know what?
I think, Leone's an interesting guy.
And then what's the difference of the spaghetti western? Because the spaghetti western is coined by critics. When these movies start coming out in the stateside, critics laugh them off, and and Eastwood's always had that kind of problem through his years, that he gets, shitty reviews from critics and stuff like that. And that was a derogatory term put on these movies. These were spaghetti westerns. They weren't going to last long.
Some of the Italian filmmakers really hate the term. They're like, they're not spaghetti westerns. They're Italian westerns. Yeah. Some of them don't care.
And they're different because you look at, like, especially you look at For a Few Dollars More here, where it's like a lot of these movies have a different look. They were shot in Spain. They were shot in Almeria, I think it's pronounced, the region of Spain. And it's very barren compared to, like, Monument Valley or Our Look of the West. It kind of looks a lot like America's south of the border in Mexico. It looks like that kind of a look. And in the American Western, Mexico is always represented for us like you're going to get away to Mexico, the bandits. You're going to, you failed. You're going to go down to Mexico and start again. It's always like you're going to cross the border, get away from your problems. When you get to these movies look slightly different because it's like these vast, barren wastelands. They're dry. They're different looking. A lot of the cities that could be looking sometimes ancient, like in For a Few Dollars More, maybe not a lot of windows. Everything, the people are dirty. A lot of them maybe look ethnic, like because they are Spanish or Italian in cast. Yeah. They could pass as Mexicans. So it's this huge different look at even aside from them being foreign. It has this whole different look of. I guess this could be the depths of Mexico, the very scary, wasteland, or the kind of, places that are down there, and it has a very distinct look versus our westerns that I think people end up then clinging on to of their version of Mexico. And it's when you get into the period of revisionist westerns they talk about after these, with the American Hang 'em High and Sam Peckinpah does in The Wild Bunch, you start seeing a lot of that aspects being recycled into Hollywood westerns. I'm done.
One thing I do think is interesting about Leone is we think of now. We talked on Predator 2. We mentioned Stranger Things. We talked about nostalgia. Not just in podcasting like us, but nostalgia being a big thing in filmmaking. We talked about this with probably in The Blob, on Grease, and how like the filmmakers of the time start to make things that they're nostalgic for from their past. Like by the 80s, the kids that grew up in the 50s with those sci-fi people like Carpenter doing The Thing, they make a nostalgic. They go back to like they remake the 50s movies.
Yeah.
And when we did Grease, we're talking about how there was this big boom of like 50s nostalgia with American Graffiti and Happy Days and then Grease and early 60s, pre the British invasion type stuff. Leone was also a nostalgic filmmaker. Leone wanted to make movies that made audiences feel the way he felt when he was a kid. Yeah. In his mind, he was making fairy tales, but he was making fairy tales for adults.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, an important aspect of Leone's style is that he is a big kid who's trying to make movie magic and make audiences, marvel at like the wonder of cinema. And for a few dollars more, we start to see confidence as a director and starting to start to explore things that would become trademarks, even though we said like he only made 7 films in all as a director, but those 7 films for the most part made a huge impact on cinema, especially these spaghetti westerns, especially like these 3.
I wonder if you could put him in, you could say Stanley Kubrick, or you could say now Quentin Tarantino, who've made very little but have been prophetic. I wonder if his have been so.
I would imagine so, because the impact, the impact of, people will say Good, Bad, the Ugly, the fact that the Morricone music.
Sure. It's just as iconic as anything.
It's parody.
Yeah.
Now. It's so it's so important
that
it's become parody, and the way he shot those movies. But this is like where it starts. He starts for a few dollars more opens. We don't jump into the story. There's we don't really even get into the story of this movie until 20 minutes in.
And also when they get another aspect of these greater Italian spaghetti westerns is that the civilization they're presenting is kind of like on decline. The world's in chaos. It's a wild place. People are merciless. And when you get for a few dollars more, he gets a bigger budget. So he's able to add a little more of American things in it to make it look more of like an American Western. So you get the train, you get guys reading the Bible. You may have like a Native American Indian extra. You get the towns are called El Paso. He makes a town that still stands today. So you get a little more stuff that looks more like a traditional American Western.
The budget goes from $200,000 for a Fistful of Dollars jumps up to around $600,000 for a few dollars more.
And Eastwood comes back.
And he makes a better deal for himself because he didn't really make any money on a Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah, and there's also a problem where he made Fistful of Dollars with a company called Jolly Films, and they supposedly the lore is they owed him a little more money, and they were refusing to pay him what they owed him unless he did a sequel because he wasn't planning to do a sequel. So then, to do a sequel, they had to
kind of blackmailed into doing a sequel.
and then he has a dispute with them, and he gets other producers, and I forget who the other producer is, who also is very famous for doing something. Maybe Last Tango in Paris. He makes it with him, and that's kind of the joke where they get the title for a few dollars more. It's like it's a pound on the first title's movie, but really it's also he wants to get fucking paid. But the thing is, the clutch is they need to bring Eastwood back to do this because they need him because he was the star of the first one. Meanwhile, cut to Eastwood in America. Eastwood still hasn't seen Fistful of Dollars because it hasn't been released domestically. So he gets a call. He's still doing Rowdy Yates Rawhide. They're like, will you come back? And he's like, well, I haven't even seen the first one yet, so I can't commit to the, without seeing it. And they're like, well, we'll offer you a shitload of money. I forget what his price goes up from, like, was it $5,000 or $15,000 the first movie? And he goes, well, listen, I want to see the first movie first. So they rush him over an Italian language print because they were having a legal dispute about Yojimbo domestically of it getting released domestically. So
they didn't have an English language print finished yet.
So he got a couple friends together and they went to a CBS screening room and he thought it was going to be a joke, and he watched the first movie in Italian and he was captivated. And all his friends were like, that's really good. He's like, oh yeah, I guess it seems good. So he came back and he's like, yeah, I'll work with that director again. So they get Eastwood, and then they were looking to get someone else in there to up the ante. And they're looking at I guess Lee Marvin was the first choice, and he couldn't. He was doing Cat's Baloo. They looked at
Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, everybody that kind of wanted for the first movie. They went to again,
and again they said
but
no,
because this movie hadn't been released in America yet.
They're doing something that they can't be done, son, like they say in Smokey and the Bandit. And it's funny because all these people we keep naming, maybe with the exception of Lee Marvin, are people that he goes on working with.
Yeah,
James Colburn, Jason Robards is in the third one, but Charles Bronson, Henry Fonda. So
Once Upon a Time in the West.
So they end up. He remembers Lee Van Cleef, and Lee Van Cleef is a guy who got his start. He was an accountant in Jersey, and he got his start doing stuff in Jersey. And then he came over to start doing westerns and stuff. He got his first start in the play of Mr. Roberts, right? And I have a very weird story where, according to my family lore on my mother's side, my grandparents, when they were doing the Mr. Roberts play in the early 50s first, before Henry Fonda stepped into that role, when they were in the New York, Connecticut area, they needed a goat for the Mr. Roberts. So somehow my mom, the farm that she lived on, they had a cow, they had a goat. They used that goat. I think it was called Bertha. And they were using that goat for a time. And this is a play that Lee Marvin got to start on. And my grandmother used to tell me that, like, she used to tell the people playing sailors, like, please don't feed him cigarette butts, because that's not good. It's bad for his stomach, and they feed him cigarette butts. So when I was little, I used to have 8x10s of Mr. Roberts. I didn't understand who they were, and you see this goat, and it's because it was the goat that my grandparents had. But Lee Marvin gets a start. He becomes a villain. I'm sorry. Lee Van Cleef gets a start in 50s. He's in High Noon, I think, is his first movie.
He basically plays
heavy.
He plays like the second bad guy on the left, basically.
In High Noon?
In most of his roles.
And the man who shot Liberty Valance, which is, I think, in 61 or 62. He's in also a third Western. But he literally, that's how people know him. They know him from being just this guy.
And because he has a very specific look.
Well,
because in a lot of those movies, some of them he doesn't even have lines.
No,
he's just kind of staying.
Yeah, he's just a menacing guy. He's in the gunfight at the OK Corral. But when he first almost gets High Noon, I think the director says to him, or the producer, you should get surgery on your nose, and he tells him to politely to screw off. I'm not gonna, but he gets the part anyway. But he becomes huge in TV. He's in I think the Lee Marvin Twilight Zone episode. I might be wrong, but it's a Western. But he's in a couple Twilight Zones. But he never really had a starring role. So by the time this comes around, he's a heavy drinker, maybe even an alcoholic, and he's painting houses. He's a freelance painter. And I guess Leone must have remembered him, and they call him, and he's like, sure, I'll do it. So he ends up being Colonel Douglas Mortimer in this.
It's like there's different stories. They go to Hollywood. Leone and his producer hop on a plane. They go to Hollywood looking for him, is one of the stories, and they find him coming out of some place, and they approach him in a parking lot is one story. One story is they're at a bar and they see him at the they're having dinner someplace, and they see him at the bar, and they send somebody over to ask him to come and talk to them, and they talk to him in this restaurant, and they're just like, do you want to do it? And can you leave on Sunday? And it was Friday.
Because they were getting close, and they didn't have a guy locked in to be Eastwood's opposite.
There's a couple of different stories about how they actually approached Lee Van Cleef to do it. But I would imagine for Lee Van Cleef, this was probably an amazing opportunity. And sure, why the fuck not? Go to Italy or go to Spain.
Yeah.
Same reason that Eastwood did it originally. It was maybe he'd never been there, or maybe it was this could be a chance for vacation. Also, he'd been kicking around, and he hadn't started.
He was 40 years old at that point.
And he hadn't started anything. He didn't have a starring part in anything. This was, really,
he had bills to pay.
If you look at really, even though Eastwood is thought of as being the star for A Few Dollars More, really it's about Lee Van Cleef's character. Really, he's kind of the protagonist.
And I think that's what makes this movie successful, is that you have Eastwood as the no-name Joe in Fistful of Dollars, who has no past, no present. You don't know his history. He's kind of the same in this, but he becomes the spectator, and you get a character like Douglas Mortimer, Lee Van Cleef, who has a past. He living in his past. His past is connected to the villain, the antagonist in it, and also it makes Eastwood's character more relatable, because Eastwood's you get a little more.
It's a little bit like like the Mad Max Fury Road. It was like, that movie's not about Mad Max.
No.
Mad Max is just there, and he's helping out.
And it's interesting because if you look at Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, they're clearly set post the Civil War. And then you look at For a Few Dollars More, that's technically a prequel because that takes place during the Civil War.
Good, Bad, the Ugly.
I'm sorry. I say everything wrong all the time. Good, the Bad, the Ugly is technically a prequel to Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More because that's taking place during the Civil War. But the progression of the Eastwood man with no name character, the El Cigaretto, as they called him in Italy,
he actually has a name in this movie, but not in the American print.
No, but his character becomes more sympathetic by the time he becomes Blondie in For a Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And people credit his relationship with Lee Van Cleef in this is kind of like what softens that character up.
Sure.
But yeah, it's more of the first scene, like you're saying, getting back to, you said the beginning opening when they're on the train and you get the opening of this when you see him reading the Bible, Lee Van Cleef. It's very, you very quickly, he's the bounty hunter too. You get to humanize what's going on in his struggle, and there's a very interesting,
Yeah, well, like Leone's, he takes his time in the beginning here. He's not worried about jumping right in. We introduce Van Cleef, we introduce Eastwood's character, but we don't really know what's going on.
You established that
we introduced them
as bounty hunters
but
doing their trade.
But the movie doesn't really get going until 20 minutes in, and this has become something that becomes part of Leone's style a little bit, like living in the world for a little while before he's not worried about jumping right in.
And the first scene establishes Lee Marvin as a badass. And
Van Cleef.
I keep saying Lee Marvin. Lee Van Cleef. It establishes him as a badass. You get to see like his weaponry. That little thing about, I love the whole, in these movies, the sound of the gun. That sound effect, which is very iconic in the Leone westerns, but also the thing with the range of bullets and all that kind of a thing with the Lee Van Cleef character. And then as soon as Lee Van Cleef brings his bounty in, it's very funny. We had I used to have in college this poster, the original Italian poster hanging up, and then I gave it to my roommate, Mike Bram Leroy, and I introduced him to this movie. So when we graduated college, when he was moving out, I gave him the poster, said, take it, now it's part of you. But his joke was when we used to watch this one, when you see Lee Van Cleef take the thing down and go like, somebody else was looking for him, and Lee Van Cleef's like, who it was? He's like, I don't know who he was, but his name was Mango. In this, we used to always say, like, I don't know who he was, but his name was Clint Eastwood. And then it cuts to, like, that awesome... It's, like, one of the best openings of all time, the setup of the Eastwood character. You get, like, Eastwood with his wrist strap on. He comes in, it starts raining, and his name in this movie is Manco, which I guess is Spanish for one-handed, one-armed. And it's something I've always picked up on and loved about the opening sequence with Eastwood is when he walks into that town, he does all the action only with his left hand.
It's all one-handed.
Because you don't really notice it, but it's because he's got his right hand on his revolver, his gun.
Because it's underneath his poncho, so you don't see it.
Yeah, so it's so badass.
But he's ready to pull it at any second.
Yeah, so he beats the crap out of the guy he's looking for. These other guys show up, and I love it too, where it's like your money, your life, you decide, and then these guys are behind him, and he uses the mirror on the bar, looks, and then he flies around, and it's so, and that's where he reveals his right arm. It's been on his gun the whole time. Kills everybody, walks up, the other guy's still moving, he shoots behind him over the shoulder, gets the guy. Great openings for two iconic guys, and then that's the next step is who we're looking for is the third guy we start here, who's Indio, Jean-Marie Volonté, who's
one of the great movie villains,
possibly one of the best. This portrayal. I mean, he's in Fistful of Dollars. It confuses people because he's the heavy in Fistful of Dollars. Eastwood's in Fistful of Dollars, so people speculate that Eastwood's character is the same in these three movies, although there was an Italian court case because, like we said, that Leone got into trouble with the Jolly Films producers because he wanted to go make these sequels or whatever with a new producer, so they sued, and the Italian courts have decided, no, the Eastwood character is not the same Joe to this one because even though he has Western traits, it's more of an icon. He's a fairy tale. He's a myth. He's someone of legend like a Western is, so you can't copyright that. But Jean-Marie Volonté in this is clearly somebody else because the other guy dies in the first movie. But his character is phenomenal. Our first appearance, if you're keen with music like Blake is, you start already hearing the Watch theme. When they break him out of jail and then he kills, and his whole thing is so amazing. He's got the madness of Cody Jarrett from White Heat. this, which is kind of the insanity which you start seeing in characters like Alan Arkin and as Harry Rowe Jr. and Wait Until Dark, where it's just the psychotic, like he's daring people, like it's almost like he knows his soul is damned from his actions of killing in his backstory, raping and killing the woman, where he gets to watch. He's almost daring people to like kill him. Like at the beginning when he goes after the guy that put him in jail, he takes the family, the newborn baby and the mother outside, kills them, almost one as revenge, and two because he doesn't give two shits, he'll do anything. Yeah. Three, he's almost daring this guy to get so mad to kill him, but then he's easily able to best the guy and kill the guy. But we set up amazingly how he's wanting to die.
Well, yeah,
it's like the idea of the Joker.
There's this, there was a Ricky Gervais series on Netflix recently, so it's still there, but the concept of is that like his wife dies of cancer, and the concept of the show is he want in the beginning, like he's just going to kill himself, but then they have a dog. Yeah. So he stays alive to like feed the dog.
Now, see, you've told me to watch this, and I haven't watched it because I'm worried that at the end of the series the dog's going to die.
And but the idea is that like not caring whether you live or die becomes a bit like a superpower. Yeah. Because then you really can do anything because you don't care what happens to you. Like if you're confronted by bad guys, like you'll fight back because you're not afraid of being killed by them. Yeah. It's a kind of like what's happening with this guy.
Paul Kersey you see in down in Death Wish, Charlie Bronson, same thing. It's like you become this vigilante badass, whatever you are.
Yeah, because like if you don't care about your own well-being, then you'll do anything.
So you have this guy,
and I feel like that's a little bit of what's going on here
with Indio.
And what's great about his performance, besides
Jean-Marie Volonté,
besides his like big theatrical performance, is that his performance creates a backstory for me as a viewer, maybe not for everybody, that is not there in the script. It's to me, you watch this and obviously now there's going to be tons of spoilers, so spoiler alert. We find out that, on a rainy night, he's viewing this woman and her husband or boyfriend, and he breaks in, kills the boyfriend, and then rapes the woman. And then
it's clearly years younger because his present day, he's graying in his beard and his hair, but in this flashback that we see, which the rape was actually cut from the censors, which was, I guess, only restored that sequence in the DVD versions. I didn't know. But he's a little more trim. He's got black hair. He's younger. We don't know what the relationship is. We'd assume that it's...
For me, his performance
the implication
is what gives me context in that, like... So he's raping this woman, and we see her grab a gun. This is all at the end of the movie, is when all this is revealed. But
this end of it.
But it's important... But since we're talking about him and his performance... You see her reach and grab a gun, and we think that she's going to kill him, but she ends up shooting herself to put herself out of the misery. And then he takes this watch that she was giving to the other guy, or he was giving to her. It seems weird that he would be giving her a watch with her own picture in it.
I think he's giving... I think the husband, whoever it is to the husband, they're in bed together, and that's the first flashback we see, him watching and then coming and shooting the guy and then ripping her clothes off.
So he takes this watch that plays music. And then his performance through the rest of the movie... To me, like, all that puts this into context. Like, to me, and whether this is not in the script, the only reason why he would be as impacted by this is because he loved her.
Yeah, and she must have been...
So they must have had a relationship, or he admired her from afar, but they must have had something before
at least in his mind, or...
Before this.
The murder.
And then he takes her, and then rather than be with her... she kills herself. I mean, rather than be with him, she opts to kill herself.
Or even kill him. It's like, what's the implication of why she's killing herself?
And then, so it's like, one, he's been rejected by her twice. Two, he lost her. Whatever it is, none of that's in the script.
Yeah.
I mean, we see the scene, but we don't have any context for that scene. All that is in his performance. For me as a viewer, everything that I glean that I just said, all this backstory, the context for all that stuff is the way he plays that character. and it's amazing.
It's almost like the setup to the Joker of how he became the way he is. I mean, because the reality of that, if you let it sink in, is that
because if he's just an asshole psycho that goes in, kills a guy, and rapes a woman, and she kills herself, he wouldn't give a shit.
No, but he was watching. He wouldn't be watching from the window in the rain.
He wouldn't be haunted by this for the rest of his life.
So he must have either, in his mind, had a relationship with her, or they did, and then now he's watching her, and she's with her husband or new whatever, and then he goes and kills her and starts having his way with her. She'd rather kill herself than, of course, be raped, but then be with him or kill him. So she's dying to be with her lover that he's killed.
Yeah.
So it's like Blake says, he's been rejected twice, but he's been rejected like the worst way possible. That she'd rather kill herself than be with him, be raped by him, and then she kind of wins because she ends up being with the dead lover.
And so he takes this watch, and this watch becomes a very important part of the movie.
And an important piece to him.
And to him, but also, it's in a way a little bit of a MacGuffin.
Because he sets up in that first sequence when he kills the person that got him in jail, he says after he kills that guy's wife and baby in this church, a really fucked up sequence to set him up. He's like, okay, now you're pissed. Here, he turns the watch on. He goes, when the chimes end, go for your gun and try to shoot me. And then you have this amazing sequence where you get the starting of this song that's iconic. But then you have that second verse where it's fucking organ.
Yeah.
Marconi goes Morricone. Yeah, Morricone. He goes balls out, and you get like the fucking Phantom of the Opera. And it's like this. It becomes gothic.
Well, this becomes one of those aspects.
Then he kills him. He shoots him.
This couple of things about the music. One, you said, when we were just talking about this rape killing scene, we see a snippet. Dion indicated that we saw a snippet of that earlier in the movie. Now that comes after scene where Van Cleef and Eastwood's characters, they're meeting up and they're deciding like maybe we should work together on this. Yeah. And Eastwood asks, essentially, what? Like, what's your beef? Or whatever.
Or what's up with the watch, too? And, and then he goes, and that line's always stuck with me. I'm sorry, is the question indiscreet?
He's like, no, but maybe the answer is.
Yeah, and Eastwood's enough to respect that,
Now, so the very next scene is we get a little bit of indication about what's going on there. Now, watching it this time and having been obsessed with music, film music, for the last 5 years of my life. I almost wish that scene wasn't there, that flashback scene.
Okay.
Because what happens is over Van Cleef's character, when that question is raised, we hear the theme from the watch, but not played through the watch, played by like a guitar or we just hear like that melody of the watch.
Yeah.
But it's not the watch. Yeah. And then there's an instant cut to Indio's character like laying on the bed with the watch, and the music instantly changes, clean cut from this instrument playing that theme to the watch playing that theme, and then that goes into the flashback.
So it goes from non-diegetic of the theme over Lee Van Cleef,
which means it's the score from outside the world of the movie. It's the score of the movie to music being played within source music inside the movie.
It's on a simple watch is the simple theme from the watch.
And the reason why I'm saying that I almost wish that flashback scene wasn't there is because the music already does what we need that scene to do, which is it connects. It's saying Van Cleef and Indio are connected. The music is telling us they're connected. We don't need to know why yet.
Yeah.
They could have taken that flashback scene out there, have the reveal at the end of the movie, and we wouldn't have missed that scene.
It might have been more impactful.
Because the music tells us. The reason why he's doing this, it's because of this fucking guy. The music does it. And it's brilliant.
Well, it's brilliant how Morricone uses the music. Like I said, the first scene when you are revealed to Volante, when they break him out of jail, you hear the music. The music's always with him in some sort of cue done with, either with like a Latin trumpet at the end when they go balls out, the the guitar, and it haunts him just as much. And you start to, then that's when the movie starts to develop that Lee Van Cleef's character isn't just a kind of one-dimensional bounty hunter trying to get, he's connected somehow. And that's the reason why you realize when, if you know the movie well, when you watch it again, when he first sees the poster after, after Eastwood, they both get introduced. They both see that poster of him laughing when he gets broken out of jail. You see the gunshots, and then you see this cut. First, I've always remembered it as it being cuts to the two of them looking at the poster, like they both want it. It's like, oh, they're both bounty hunters. They're both going to go, and it's stylized to show them.
Yeah.
But it quickly, if I remember correctly, Eastwood's cut out of that. And it's then just closer shots on Lee Van Cleef.
Yeah, it's like flash cuts
of Lee Van Cleef looking at the eyes in the poster, and it's the poster's him laughing psychotically, Indio. And then there's an association for the astute viewer there that, oh, wait a minute.
There's something more to this
one.
It's not just the $10,000 he's interested in.
He recognizes him, And there's a great dichotomy between Eastwood's character and Van Cleef's in it, because Eastwood is 35 when they shoot this. Van Cleef's 40. Van Cleef's character he's playing is 50. He calls him the old man. He calls him the young kid. It's almost kind of like the same thing where you get from
boy.
You kind of get from him playing the Roddy Yates character on the show with I think his name's Eric Fleming from Rawhide. But they have a very funny, because it becomes there's an element of comedy in this movie that really works when it's
genuinely funny.
It's good. Like there is almost this professionalism between the two, which is very funny that they respect each other. And, when Eastwood makes his appearance known to Van Cleef when they get to the town and they realize they're on, Eastwood employs this kid to tell him who else is coming into town. Very much like another Western kind of trope. Yeah. The kid tells him, this guy just came into town. Who? He's like, Lee Van Cleef over there. You know Lee Van Cleef?
This guy just walked out of the hotel.
You saw him in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and the other movies he was in. So when they're watching, and then they make the reveal that they're watching each other with binoculars, the next scene, it's like there's this Chinese guy comes in and he starts cleaning out his... Very funny, this laundryman cleans out his stuff in his hotel room and walks Lee Van Cleef out. And Lee Van Cleef's like, what the fuck? So Lee Van Cleef follows him to outside, and Eastwood's waiting for him.
Take it to the train station.
Yeah, and into the room, to the station. And he goes, and he leaves. It's right before the scene Blake was just talking about, of them coming to a compromise. There's this very funny...
dick wagging around.
Yeah,
dick measuring
contest. But it's done in like a funny... it's like they even have the kids watching from under the boardwalk saying like, hey, it's just like how we do it, where they come out and they look at each other, they size each other up,
step on each other's shoes.
Yeah, they walk around each other, then they step, they get mud on each other's shoes. Eastwood, I think, punches Lee Van Cleef, knocks his hat off, and then as he's trying to pick his hat up, he shoots his hat further down the street, put a hole through his hat to the point where his gun won't make the range anymore. That's fuck shit. Lee Van Cleef's able to put his hat on, take his fucking gun out, which has the range, and he's able to shoot Eastwood's hat off his head and then keep it in the air and unload, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, let's put our dicks back in our pants, and then there's the scene where they start talking. Hey, look, we're on the same thing. Let's work together.
Yeah, a couple of things about that. Leone was an only child who was born to parents who were a little bit later in life. So he was a young kid to parents that were a little bit older. And so there's a thought that these male relationships that start to develop For a Few Dollars More than we see, then in his movies afterwards, whether it be Good, Bad, the Ugly, we see it, this male kind of camaraderie also in Once Upon a Time in the West and Duck You Sucker, or Fistful of Dynamite, whatever title you want to call it. It's him kind of like fulfilling this like brother relationship that he never had as a kid. And so we see like a very specific male on male, platonic love that happens in his movies, especially starting with For a Few Dollars More, that appears to be very personal to Leone.
And you'll almost get kind of that between Eli Wallach and Eastwood, kind of.
Yeah, sure.
For a few dollars, for Good, Bad, the Ugly, even though he does almost try to kill Eastwood out in the desert, and he realizes he needs him. But then at the end of the movie where Eastwood leave Eli Wallach to be hanged, but he lets him. There is a kind of a and it goes back. There's a really great Western called The War Wagon with Kurt Douglas, John Wayne, and maybe even what's his face? Anyway, but there's a rivalry there, and it's the funny movie where like John Wayne's on the run and Kurt Douglas is after him as a bounty hunter, but then they team up to rob this wagon, and there's a scene when they both at the same time go shoot two guys down, and they both die, and then they look at each other, and Kurt Douglas is like, mine fell first, and then John Wayne's like, mine was taller. Like it's like that funny, kind of, of the what do you call that? The macho rivalry, sporting rivalry, and you kind of get that through the whole movie here, where like, they team up and they decide they're going to put Eastwood on the inside because. There's a very great scene with Klaus Kinski, with Lee Van Cleef, when he figures out when they're casing the bank they're going to rob, why they're here. He kind of starts something with Klaus Kinski, who has a hunchback that Klaus Kinski can't finish because they're on a job. So it's the end of the movie when they go to that town, the Agua Caliente. And all of a sudden Lee Van Cleef's there, and he's like, "Fuck, you're here too." Which is
also funny because there's the term. That in itself is a joke. They're going to Agua Caliente, which means hot water. And that's like an idiom, like you're in hot water.
Yeah, they're in hot water,
A couple of things I want to say about just two things I want to say about the score before we go on is, I alluded earlier that to me there's some things about For a Few Dollars More that are kind of prototype for Once Upon a Time in the West. The music is one of them. This idea of having this device that's source music within the movie, but also part of the score, is kind of echoed in Once Upon a Time in the West with Charles Bronson's harmonica character. He plays the harmonica, and then that harmonica sound becomes part of the overall score. It's his personal theme, which is also the idea of, there's more to go into this idea of having characters with specific themes, comes from Italian opera way before film.
Leone has these are almost, he has like an operatic soul, Leone, so he's making these into these Western operas, but even that becomes a huge theme in Once Upon a Time in the West, where Henry Fonda has this awesome rocking guitar theme. Charlie Bronson has a harmonica theme that he even kind of plays out of his own mouth.
Yeah.
And then you even have Jason Robards has this kind of like more of a bumbling kind of a theme with Claudette.
But even the girl has that big sweeping...
she has this
big sweeping, beautiful orchestral theme, which is like when she comes in Once Upon a Time, she shows up, she gets off the train, and she gets on her car.
Claudia Cardinelli.
When the camera comes up over the train station and reveals her in the town. So there's
just let him slap your ass. That's what he says. There, just give it to him at the end.
So this idea of the music, themes,
representing people's,
but also it being used within the film and without the film. And the other thing that this is more trivial but interesting, and something that I actually happened to learn while preparing my next episode of Cuts from the Crypt, this other podcast I do, which is about horror film music, is that there is a guitar player named Alessandro Alessandroni who plays a lot of the guitars in Morricone's music, especially in these westerns, but he's also the guy that does the whistling.
Okay.
He's the whistler in these themes have especially this one has a very specific whistling sound. And so this Alessandroni is the guy who does the whistling. He plays guitar, but he also went on to compose music on his own. He did one of my favorite spaghetti westerns, a movie called Johnny Hamlet. He scored that movie, but he also did some Italian horror movies, including The Devil's Nightmare and Killer Nun.
Yeah.
So a little shout out to Alessandroni, who passed away a couple of years ago. But I actually learned that I knew of him, but I didn't know that he was the guy that whistled in all those Morricone scores until I was researching stuff while I was doing this other podcast that I do.
And it's something that might be overlooked too. The very first scene of this movie is another brilliant play for the astute watcher or viewer to understand what's happening right before the credits. You hear just this person whistling and taking his time, and out in the distance, you just see this guy on a horse. And it's, again, playing with that idea of the weaponry and the technology, and you come to find out after repeated viewings, it's the Eastwood character waiting there for his bounty to come in range of his rifle. So he's like whistling, and then he shoots the guy off the horse and the guy dies. And then that's when you get the... And you have the credits come up. And to me, this is, Fistful of Dollars has a good theme. Good and the Bad and the Ugly has the iconic theme. But to me, this is the best.
I love the music.
The watch, the don't bow, 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 down. Even the then
the trumpet at the end that you were saying
the
earlier.
Latin trumpet, and you have like the and even like in the sorry,
doing a little acapella.
Even when you get to the doon doon doon, which is also another theme of the watch. But even when you get to the sequences, the dream sequences, when they're alluding to the flashback, even that crazy music, and that's great.
There's a lot of stuff that's almost horror-ish.
Yeah,
that stuff. Some of the organ stuff you were talking about earlier. There's also a scene involving I think it's the scene where Indio's going to go look at the trunk and reveal that the money's not in the trunk.
Oh.
The way the piano's playing there is something that I don't know if they did it purposely or ripped it off or was an homage, but there's something the piano's doing there that you hear in Goblin's stuff later in Profondo Rosso, 10 years later.
And that's a great scene, too, because when at the end of the movie, when they're going to get the loot that they stole and they open the trunk and they realize the trunk is gone because Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef had taken the money and hid it, they leave in there his poster, and all of a sudden you get it's like Sorcerer. When we did Sorcerer, at the end of Sorcerer, when that guy, it's a fucking Roy Scheider losing his mind. It's one of my favorite sequences in cinema history. And that guy's bleeding out. He's like, I can't go. You go to Monaco without me. And then all of a sudden he hears the guy start laughing because he's gone crazy. And he looks down, and the guy's the guy's dead. The guy's like the color of the interior of the car, looking up at him, but he's hearing the laugh. To me, that was when Volonté opens the trunk and he looks at himself and he hears the laugh. It's his own laugh. Yeah. And he starts freaking out. And that other guy who's with him, who I always equate to James Caan, he's like a poor man James Caan.
I can see that, or like if you combined Roy Scheider and James Caan,
they had a kid.
Made it extra Italian.
Yeah, it's this guy. That's that right-hand guy that ends up being the last one killed. It's amazing pieces of cinema magic here.
I think his name might be Luigi Pistilli, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, and it's just another thing to touch on as we start heading down the road.
We're running out of time.
Because my mom, she told me she's going to be here by a certain time to pick us up. The Lee Van Cleef character, I think it's important that when we talk about having a bigger budget in the second one and bring in, say, more American ideas in it to make it more identifiable as an American Western, like, big saloon girls, ass-slapping guys as they're walking by, trains, the technology that's coming in. You also get that idea of, they say Colonel Mortimer is this very iconic, legendary colonel from the Civil War, from the Carolinas. He was the best shot in the Carolinas. And it kind of links you to the stuff we talk about in The Beguiled, which is that Gothic, Southern Gothic history of he maybe was from, you get the hints of, they don't say this literally, but you can extrapolate that maybe he's from a aristocratical family, because of the watch and,
the way he dresses.
And his sister.
Seems like a proper Southern gentleman.
Exactly. So you have that whole idea of the Gothic, what's going on, and who knows, is it incest like we talked about in The Beguiled with the ideas of those Gothic westerns from back in the day, that idea.
But there's also like his arsenal. It's very like almost James Bond.
Very futuristic, yeah. He's got different ranges, different kinds, guns for different things.
Different barrel lengths, and then he's got that little stock that he puts on the pistol.
Yeah, so he can get because it has a little farther range, he can stabilize it. He's got a Dillinger a smaller gun that he kills what's his Klaus Kinski with at the end that he doesn't go for his other gun.
Klaus Kinski, great. The face twitch that he does.
Oh, it's so great. And he's an example of, this was a Italian, Spanish, and German production shot in Spain, and they grabbed Klaus Kinski because of the German side of it. Klaus Kinski comes in here, and it's a great little part of him at the time, and they entertained somebody else as, I forget who did they say they wanted to try to get as him, but they couldn't get
that I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was the German representative. There was one of the henchmen, actor named Aldo Sabrel, who was a Spanish actor. So, was peppering these different regions into the film so that they, what we were saying before, more just on Leone's style. We start to hear, not just the taking time at the beginning, but which, all that opening is like pure cinematic storytelling. But then we have the big circle duel at the end. That's, that becomes a Leone trademark.
That you see at the end of For a Few Dollars More.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, at the end of Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
That happens here?
That happens here first. It then happens in Good, Bad, the Ugly. These, close-up shots, not just like what we think of during the gunfight, but just throughout the movie, these close-ups with, a character on one side of the frame and something happening in the background. On the other side of the frame, we see this a lot during like the bank robbery scene. That becomes a Leone trademark. That starts to kind of come up here. Like I said, the music, the way the music is used becomes a bit of a trademark. Happens again in Once Upon a Time in the West. And also what the motivation, a lot of the, Lee Van Cleef's motivation throughout this is revealed that the woman that he raped and who committed suicide was his sister. In Once Upon a Time in the West, we find out that the motivation for Charles Bronson's character, if I'm not mistaken, was his brother. So it's like revenge on the heavy of the movie is also, it's a sibling. The death of a sibling revenge.
This is done in that exploitative piece of Sam Raimi's Quick and the Dead.
Quick and the Dead, which was...
I haven't seen that movie since the first time. Yeah, but isn't it
Gary
Sinise, right?
But then we also have a little bit, so much of Once Upon a Time in the West revolves around the introduction of the railroad to the West.
Technology.
But we have a little bit in a very hilarious scene with Eastwood going to the old guy played by Joseph Egger.
Oh,
and he lives next to the railroad.
They're both trying to figure out who the other guy is before they figure it's Eastwood trying to figure out who Lee Van Cleef is, and he gets his backstory.
But we do get this little.
He goes as hermit.
The way this introduction of the railroad is affecting
because this nutty guy who lived out by himself. He's
I wanted to buy my property, but I wouldn't sell it.
I said that's bullshit because he's like the local. They call him prophet, and then at one point everything starts shaking because they've literally built the train station right next to his house. I guess if we bounce around a little bit, what ifs? I said it was Henry Silva they were looking for, maybe casting as the Hunchback. Jack Palance was up maybe for Colonel Mortimer. I could see maybe Jack Palance playing him in there. A great movie for if you want to watch Jean-Marie Volonté is a classic called Christ Stopped at Eboli. Mm-hmm. And it's a movie about this city that's a real city, Eboli, up in the mountains. I think in the past 10 years was maybe really hurt by one of those crazy earthquakes they had.
Yeah.
But it's about his character going up there in modern times in the 70s or whenever they shot it in the 80s and having this story up there because it's an idea that when Christ was alive, Christ didn't even he didn't go, he stopped, he didn't go up to this town or whatever. Great movie for him.
Well, on one note of Volonté, which we're talking about, he
Le Sucre Rouge too.
Well, he
that's that we brought that up in what movie recently? That's the real famous French bank robbing movie.
Yeah, I don't remember what movie.
But that was maybe for John Wick.
But possibly.
But he's in that. He's mustacheless, so I don't trust him. But he's in that movie.
Well, what's interesting about him is, and I don't know, I don't remember if this story is based on for Fistful of Dollars or For a Few Dollars More, but apparently there was some tension between him and Leone on set because he was so theatrical in his performance and so over the top and wouldn't tone it down for Leone, so that Leone started doing tons of takes of everything with him, trying to tire him out so that he could get one towards the end of doing 20, 30 takes that was a little bit more relaxed, trying to tire this crazy actor out.
That's stuff where you hear with them George C. Scott on Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
Where Kubrick's like, he's playing it straight. Kubrick's like, give me just a wild one.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. And that would be the take he'd use.
But part of that frustration apparently is what made Volonté not want to do too many westerns anymore. And he was very left wing and very political, and so he actually reinvented himself as as an actor in political films after this. There's another spaghetti western though that's more of a political I forget something about like I forget the title. Something about the shot for the general, or something. That was the filmmaker says it's not a spaghetti. It's not a western. It's a political film about this Mexican.
Yeah,
revolution.
he was very iconic, and he was like almost like a James Dean sex symbol in Italy. But he was very left wing in his politics and was getting very vocal about stuff. And so that might have almost typecast him, or people were feared to use him.
But he also decided to start steering away from some of this more exploitive the westerns, which were popular basically for about 10 years, from 65 to about the mid-70s, and start concentrating on more political films.
Yeah. Let's see. How can we start wrapping this up? So, everything else, I love the idea of the plot with the little, the whole MacGuffin. I mean, the other MacGuffin with the bank, the
it's
vault
fantastic.
in the carpet and the cabinet.
Maybe from today's standards, you could watch it and be like, maybe it's a little bit long. Only because we're so used to a different style of.
Well, if they think this is long, they shouldn't watch Good, Bad, the Ugly.
It's very tight, but I don't. For me, I don't feel that way. I love it. It's a simple story, but an effective story. I've recited this story on a previous episode. I don't know which one, but since we're actually covering this movie, I went and I saw this movie at Lincoln Center, screening at Lincoln Center on a weekday afternoon. Wasn't very crowded.
Many years ago? Many moons?
Yeah, at least 5, maybe more. So I'm watching this movie because it's one of my favorite movies. So I thought, I'm going to go see a 35 millimeter print of this fucking movie. So it's one of the benefits of living in a place like New York City. So I go to see it. Fairly empty crowd, but sitting kind of right behind me to my, diagonally right behind me to my left. So not the seat behind me, but 1 or 2 over behind me. There's this guy with this woman, and he's kind of loud. And I'm watching this movie, and it's not like he's talking to her about something else. He's kind of like talking to the screen. He's finding things really funny, and he's very, he's got a loud laugh.
Is it my dad, evidently?
And so, there's part of me that's like, this is a little bit annoying, but at least like it's that because he's into the movie. It's not like he's on his phone having a conversation. So, like, it doesn't bother me enough to get up and move, but it is noticeable. And when this kind of thing happens, there's always there's this curiosity where, like, you want to see who the fuck this guy is. Like you said in this, I just watched like 2 hours of this movie with this guy's commentary about the movie behind me. I'm like, I wonder who the fuck is this guy. So when
who the fuck is this fucking guy?
So the movie's done. I make a point to get up and when I'm putting my coat on to look, and it was Tom Wopat from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Tom Wopat? What the hell's Tom Wopat doing there?
I don't know. Maybe he was in a play on Broadway at the time. And
you said, Tom Wopat? What you talking about all this stuff for?
I was like, Tom Wopat?
You're crazy.
I know you're just a good old boy. You never
mean no harm.
Come on, trying to watch a movie here.
So making your way any way you know how, just a little bit more than the law will allow. Tom Wopat.
So that was I finally got to see this movie, but it wasn't ruined by Tom Wopat, but it was pretty close to ruined by Tom.
That's
Wopat.
Pretty funny.
Yeah,
script in 9 days. They wrote the thing, and then Leone took it to another friend, and the script doctor banged it up a little more.
Yeah, him and Leone and Luciano
Pavarotti
Vincenzoni wrote it, and then he took it to Sergio Donati for some rewrites. Now
we have not.
Vincenzoni went on to write with Leone The Good, Bad, the Ugly, and Fistful of Dynamite, a.k.a. Duck You Sucker. And Donati went on to write Once Upon a Time in the West, and also Fistful of Dynamite, or
a.k.a. You're gonna Duck You Sucker,
or a.k.a. Duck You Sucker.
I only know this.
Both Vincenzoni and Donati have story credit on Arnold Schwarzenegger's Raw Deal.
Because it's probably Dino De Laurentiis, I bet, right? Maybe something like that.
Yeah, they don't have screenplay credit, but they have story credit.
We have not done any Italian impressions this whole cast. So probably
people have passed. With my grandfather.
Yeah, you did to your grandfather. Okay, good both. I've always known the movie as Fistful of Dynamite, but then now I see it when we looked up all the stuff here. It's only as AKA Duck You Sucker.
I always knew it as Duck You Sucker only because I heard that, and I think that's such a great name.
Yeah, and it's
so I always call it Duck You Sucker.
And that's funny because it's James Colburn playing an Irish revolutionary, and then you have Rod Steiger playing basically a Mexican character version of Eli Wallach,
yeah,
early Tony Montana, kind of a character, and then Henry Fonda is in great character in Once Upon a Time in the West. Plays against type.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic bad guys of all time. He goes on,
but not quite as good as John
as John Marie Volonté. But he goes on to do one other movie, My Name Is Nobody, with Terrence Hill and Leone.
Terrence Hill was, after what's his name?
Eastwood.
Well, post Eastwood, we get Franco Nero.
Oh yeah, of course, Franco Nero,
who plays Django, and then Franco Nero,
the man with the coffin.
And then Franco Nero becomes like the big, because Eastwood only does till Good, Bad, the Ugly.
Yeah.
And then they need another pretty boy, and so Django is Franco Nero, and then Franco Nero becomes a huge star in these spaghetti westerns, and then Franco Nero ends up then going to Hollywood. So they need someone to replace.
I think he shows
Franco Nero.
Die Hard 2, right? He's the colonel, maybe, that they're
trying
to break out of prison.
He is in Die Hard 2.
And then Terrence Hill shows up with the other guy, that big guy, and they start doing those weird comedies where it's the bigger guy, and I think that's Terrence Hill.
Yeah, well, Terrence Hill becomes the replacement, and he's in. I think he might be even in one of the Django. They take a picture of him, and they they want to make another Western, so they take a picture of him and make him look as much like Franco Nero in the picture as possible, and they get that movie greenlit. Because
he looks like
they look at the picture and they don't know that it's not Franco Nero in the movie. But he then takes up, and then Franco Nero ends up coming back to some of the what they call the Twilight spaghetti westerns in the mid 70s.
It isn't the
those are the basic, like Eastwood, Nero, and Terrence.
What's the Ernest Borgnine movie? Something Cop. Everyone loves, where it's like the superhero movie where the guy gets powers. I think it's an Italian movie. It's called Super Fuzz, Hot Fuzz, It's maybe Hot
Fuzz is with
so it's Super Fuzz.
Simon Pegg.
Yeah, Super Fuzz is this Ernest Borgnine movie that they shot in Florida and Italy, but I think it's Terrence Howard where he gets like something. He's a cop and something blows up near him, and he's a motorcycle cop, and then he gets superpowers. He can float around. So this movie ends up coming out. It's like we said. Eastwood. Another interesting fact about him is that he was going to do. He was cast as Two-Face in the Batman series. He was going to be Two-Face on Batman 66, but the show was canceled before they got to film his episode. So he ends up coming back, and because when these movies come out back-to-back in 67, within a year of each other, because of that clout, he's able to take his money. He does the revisionist, that period of Westerns. He does Hang 'em High with Pat Hingle, who we just brought up 2 weeks ago, too. Yep. And Bruce Dern's in that, too. Who I don't know if we don't bring up, but we always talk about Bruce. Tom, I love Bruce Dern.
Yeah, well, Bruce Dern is in...
He's in a crapple, these fucker. He's in the Cowboys. He kills John Wayne, spoiler alert. But... this is where Eastwood gets his clout, and then he makes Malpaso, the production company, and then this is like how he's able to start choosing his roles. Like he brings Dirty Harry to Warner Brothers, and it's interesting because of Eastwood's popularity, he's able to logistically kind of curtail his persona and his fame by his box office success, because he starts doing genres that are really classic ones for Americans, like the Western, the country music, the Western comedy, the country Western comedy, like Any Which Way You Can, or like Paint Your Wagon, all that, or war films, or the detective story. He stays with the tried and true Americana, atypical genres, and that really becomes where his fame is. And this goes into the 70s, and there's a decline in the American Western, I guess you could say, into the 70s and 80s, and you get like Silverado or Pale Rider in the mid-80s, but they kind of fall by the wayside until like Unforgiven, and then there's a revitalization, and then now people say the Westerns are still out, but for the past 20 years, I'd say once or twice a year you get a pretty good... the Assassination of Jesse James, Open Range, the Proposition that you showed me, the remake of freaking True Grit.
Well, you get like Django Unchained.
And
the Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight. Buster Scruggs, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which just came out. The second story that's in there, the James Franco story. I think it's the second story. There's a lot of elements that point to the spaghetti westerns, because when he goes to rob the bank, I think on the bank it's called Tucumcari, and Tucumcari is the town at the beginning Lee Van Cleef is going to.
This
Tucumcari, and he stops and he gets off. Yeah, that's on the bank. And I think when James Franco walks into the bank, if you look screen left, I think you could see the cabinet from this movie. Like, it's supposed to be where the guy's like, pan shot, so there's that specifically, that story is, I think, is a straight homage to the Sergio Leone Westerns.
There was a funny story that I heard that, and it probably goes back to when Leone sent the Italian print to A Fistful of Dollars for Eastwood to watch. And that if you watch his performance in Fistful of Dollars, he plays it, a little bit, the way he talks is a little bit faster, but apparently, allegedly, when he watched the Italian version of it, the guy who dubbed his voice talked a little bit slower.
And it helped him.
And he liked that. And so he starts talking that way. He starts giving a little bit of a slower delivery, a little bit of a grittier delivery, and for a few dollars more, based on how he heard the Italian guy do his character.
Well,
which then becomes kind of the Eastwood persona.
Well, yeah, to touch on that Eastwood persona very early, basically cinema audiences are first introduced to him through Fistful of Dollars, even though he had bit parts in other movies, Francis the Mule and stuff. For a few dollars more, you start seeing the comedy where him, at the beginning, the first Fistful of Dollars, where he's like, I need 4 coffins. My mistake, 3. He has that joke. There's a couple jokes.
Yeah.
But in this movie, you start getting, the guy that ends up saying, like, man has knows limitations. Do you feel lucky? Dying ain't much of a living, boy. Make my day. That all comes out of here with him saying, like, at the end of this movie, where he's like, I love the idea when you have the big epic showdown of when, it's Indio and Lee Van Cleef, and he's, and it looks like Lee Van Cleef's about to not make it. And then the watch slows down. Suddenly the music picks up again. It's because Eastwood has the watch, and he's got the rifle, indicating back to the poster of I Loved It as a Kid. And then he's like, we're going to do it fairly. Now we do it. Then there's the with a big trumpet. And then, he beats him in the gunfight. Indio dies. And Lee Van Cleef's like, okay, I'm done. You can have the money. I don't need it. This is what I wanted. Yeah. Maybe in the future we'll be a partner again. And you have, little do we know, Eastwood's been picking all the bodies up. He's ready to go.
But he's also got to go get the guys that he left at the campfire.
But it's funny. He's like, he's all ready to go. He's counting the money up, and he's counting. And the one guy, the poor man's James Caan / Roy Scheider, is still alive, who's been mortally wounded.
Yeah.
He's hiding, and Eastwood's like 40, 30, 20. He's like, and then he realizes, he turns around and shoots that guy dead. And then Lee Van Cleef's like, any problems, boy? He's like, no, I thought I had problems with my adding, but I'm all right. And then he leaves. He's got all the dead bodies, and he stops at the tree, grabs the money. So now he's going to be he's bringing the stolen loot back, so he's getting the commission for bringing the money back. Yeah. So he's loaded, but you start seeing that smart ass,
sure.
Coming right out of this movie.
Of course, this relationship then is the inspiration for the way Kurt Russell plays Snake Plissken, because they cast Lee Van Cleef as like,
so he starts doing everything as
a
I
foil
would
for him, and so he starts to deliver. So Snake Plissken takes on this Eastwoodish persona.
And then you see in the third movie, for a few dollars, for Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Lee Van Cleef comes back for the Good and the Bad and the Ugly. Lee Van Cleef comes back as Angel Eyes, and he becomes this other guy where I'd have to watch that again because I haven't seen that in years, but I wonder if there's a way to extrapolate if he's the same character and now he's, I don't know, because he's so evil in that, he's a little more bad he's the villain, if he's the same character and they know each other as, Blondie Eastwood versus Angel Eyes, which is Lee Van Cleef. Mango. So, this movie comes out, and like I said, Eastwood cleverly does a couple movies at that point. I mean, he does Hang 'em High, that Western, but the next movie he does is Coogan's Bluff, which is, I think, his first modern movie, and that's like a Western in New York City kind of time, but then that's where he meets Don Siegel and Lalo Schiffer for the first time, so very quickly, that's where you could pick up Eastwood's trail of what he starts doing into the 70s.
And he was asked to be in Once Upon a Time in the West, but he turned it down.
Well, there's a very interesting rumor, which I don't know if it's true, but they were originally, if you look at the beginning of the movie, the introduction of the Charles Bronson character, you have Woody Strode, the African-American gentleman, and you have Jack Elam waiting there for the guy to get off the train. Mm-hmm. There might be a third guy, too. The urban legend is supposedly that Leone went to Eli Wallach, Lee Van Cleef, and Eastwood.
Wanted them to play those characters
as cameos at the beginning. That that it would be the three of them waiting for the train for Bronson to get off, and Bronson dispatches of them all.
Which is also allegedly that opening trade sequence. Allegedly, that was that part was come up with and kind of written by Dario Argento.
Yes, and then we've talked about that in the Argento cast, where that kind of where he got his kind of start.
Because he actually wrote a bunch of spaghetti westerns during that time period. He was a film critic, and then he started writing films. And he wrote there's a handful of them. You can find them on DVD and stuff of ones that were written by Argento, but they're not necessarily have the Argento flair. He didn't direct them, and he was just a writer for hire.
But it's interesting where you see his original, where he ends up being. We all know where Eastwood goes with his career, but I didn't know you have, into the 70s, Leone. He passes on The Godfather because he had an idea of wanting to do a movie off a novel he loved called The Hoods by a former mobster, Harry Gray, about New York City Jewish gangsters in the 20s and 30s, and that what ends up becoming Once Upon a Time in America in 1984 with Robert De Niro and James Woods, which I have to revisit again because the cut I saw was very cut up originally. I guess they took, especially that movie, the American distributor took it, recut the crap out of it, and it didn't do as well over here, but it did gangbusters overseas because it was the original international cut.
Yeah.
It has now been since released as in the original international cut. So I'm wondering if it's much better, because I remember at the ending suddenly, like, James, if I remember, somebody's dead and a garbage truck goes by. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like, it's really just, I don't, because they're cutting shit out of it. But he goes on, that ends up being his last movie, Leone's, in 1984. But he has an idea to make another Western. He wanted to do a Don Quixote movie. A Don Quixote film with Clint Eastwood as Don Quixote and Eli Wallach as Panza in it, but that didn't play out. He was thinking of doing a movie on Colt the Gun, which would be similar to Anthony Mann, the brilliant Anthony Mann, Jimmy Stewart Western Winchester 73. But he abandons that idea, and the last project he's working on before he dies is like an Americanized Western. His last Western, it would have been a movie called A Place Only Mary Knows, and he was looking to get Mickey Rourke and Richard Gere in it to be a Civil War kind of piece, similar to like the short stories he loved by like Andros Pierce, who wrote Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge, and Margaret Mitchell and some other stuff. But it wasn't revealed until 2004. Leone's son, Andrea, he released the full screenplay in a Italian cinema magazine called Ciak, C-I-A-K. So the screenplay. So that would have been awesome seeing him do that movie.
Yeah.
But this becomes so iconic, and for me, I feel it's weird because it's so monumental and instrumental, but it always gets overlooked. It's always Fistful of Dollars or
it's
A Good Man
the middle
Ugly.
child.
Yeah, and it's sad because I think it's, in my personal opinion, it has a lot more going on than either movie. Other movies are awesome.
Not to disparage the other movies,
Not at all.
because we like those. We love those too. But I agree in that this one is the most interesting to me. I love the relationship between him and Van Cleef. I love Volante's.
Sleeps with his eyes open. How crazy is that? Remember that? He takes the cigar out of his mouth.
First major character in a major motion picture who smokes dope. Smokes marijuana, although we don't know actually what's in that. Those little cigarillos those little rolled cigarettes that he's smoking.
Volante.
Yeah.
He's just so good. He's remarkably unhinged, scary, and it works. And to me, it's really like when we were dissecting Nicholson's Joker. It's like he could literally be that nut that you see end up being, in tons of, villain performances going on. So I don't know if he gets his due in that realm of villainry.
Well, the other thing that really works about his performance is Van Cleef and Eastwood are so understated.
And he's so over the top.
Almost like even they almost no inflection even in the way they deliver the dialogue. So the fact that he's so over the top, it's such a contrast
and
that just works so well against the rest of the movie that we're watching.
Lastly, now as I'm getting older, we have these great channels now that are on TV, and like I watch a lot of my television over the internet, over the antenna. So I get the stuff, and there's a channel called Grit, which is a 24-hour Western channel, and they play a lot of these early 50s B picture Westerns, and I find it so almost not rewarding, but like I don't know what the word is, like safe or comforting when I put them on, because to me it's like I've never heard of these Westerns, but there's hundreds or thousands of them.
Like I said, before 1960, roughly 40% of all Hollywood pictures
were Westerns. And it's so amazing. I'll turn this movie on, and I find it like a level of comfort, because to me it's like old Hollywood in that era. To me is like, it's like if it's a big theater troupe putting on different plays. So like when you turn a Western on, you recognize a half a dozen people.
Sure.
Oh, it's like James Gleason. It's
or
fucking
even DeForest Kelley from Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. It's DeForest Kelley. It's Jackie Lamb. It's Ernie Borgnine. It's fucking what's his name? Rudolph. The real iconic. Here, what's his name? Not Robert Rudolph, but like Robert Ryan's in these,
sure.
Or Randall. I forget his name. Fucking the
Tony Randall,
not Tony Randall. The very iconic Western. But you see all these Westerns, and I find them being very. I find it very, very comforting, and like I'm getting into.
Sure, yeah.
Now Randolph Scott.
But it's also, it's interesting that they took an American art form, the Western. The Italians took it, kind of made it their own, and then that ended up influencing the American Western, like
and
the
action genre, right, on a bigger extent. Because once the Westerns fall by the wayside, you have Eastwood doing successful Westerns in the 70s.
Then you get like characters like Mad Max, and
exactly,
Snake Plissken that are very much
Dirty Harry,
even before that with Dirty Harry, and
you get those kind of guys, or the Bronson movies, his Paul Kersey and the Death Wish movies in the 70s. I mean, this all comes back to here. And we come to find out as well, it should be noted that we do have novelizations for these three movies. Fistful of Dollars is a film novelization for a few dollars more, has a novelization by Joe Millard. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly has a novelization also by Millard. And then it goes on. There's one called, a novel after that called A Coffin Full of Dollars by Millard. A Dollar to Die is by Brian Cox, but then Joe comes back.
Brian Cox? I love him.
Brian Fox. I'm sorry. Don't get my F and C's wrong. Then Joe's coming back for The Devil's Dollar Sign, The $1 Million Blood Hunt, and then the last one, Blood for a Dirty Dollar. The Dollar novels also provide us with some background. It's revealed that the man with no name was a ranch hand who was continually persecuted by an older man named Carvel. Carvell. I'm going to make some ice cream one day.
Cookie Puss.
Yeah. Stop calling me Cookie Puss. Stop calling me the Pudgy the Whale. That's for people who even know what Carvel is. So then the trouble between the two of them led to a shootout, and the man with no name outdrew Carvel, and he killed him. So that might have been
a hit of his backstory. The continuing adventures.
With 3 novelizations and 5. So we have a total of 5 extra books on top of that, which is pretty cool for having been able to have, like furthering adventures like they did with the Dirty Harry saga into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I mean, they went and they carried on the tradition of the Dollars trilogy, and so it's the Dollars book series. Now, unfortunately, as much as Dion and I love novelizations,
we love ourselves some novelizations.
We didn't know about them until we did the research.
Yeah.
So I've got them on their way, but unfortunately...
Oh, you ordered them?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's going to be too late to talk about them.
Yeah, well, we can only try. But if we ever do one of the other ones again, or we do like the original Django, or I don't know, if we do Duck You Sucker, we'll cram them all in, read all of them, even though they have nothing to do with the Eastwood books. We'll let everybody know. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, that's Eastwood. That's Leone for a few dollars more.
I don't feel like we spent a whole lot of time on the actual movie, but there was a lot to unpack on this.
Oh, but I think there's enough.
I think it's all interesting.
Yeah, I think there's enough.
Definitely,
there.
If you have not seen it,
it's a must.
Check it out. It is like I said, along with something like Tombstone and Once Upon a Time in the West, it is one of my favorite westerns.
Yeah.
It's definitely our favorite western of the Leone Eastwood collaborations.
Yeah.
And, I still think a little bit underappreciated because
I
it's
concur.
the middle child.
Yeah, I've been saying that for 20 years.
It's
maybe more.
really,
It's looked over. It's
Yeah.
overlooked because of the other ones on either side, the pillars.
it's special.
Yeah, we could have spent more time on the movie, but I think it's enough wetting the whistle enough to go check it out. There's so many great twists
the
and
other
turns.
thing is, it's a pretty, one of its strengths is it's a pretty simple plot, so
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot to analyze in terms of there, but it's the execution
Sure.
of that simple plot.
Groundbreaking.
That makes it effective and special.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for the summer of sequels.
Summer of sequels.
It's been a lovely time for us having it here and doing it all. Next episode is our anniversary.
It's the Saturday Night Movie
Sleepover anniversary.
Sleepover extravaganza.
5 or 6
I
year.
think it's our 5th.
Yeah, for 2014. So that would make sense. The 5th. So we got a big. Usually we blow the doors out with their anniversary, which we've been doing on other casts now, the length wise.
What was our anniversary episode after Rocketeer?
After Rocketeer, could it have been Predator?
We didn't. I don't think we did that as.
Because I felt we did those back to back. Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I think that was last year, wasn't it?
Raiders of the Lost Ark was last year.
Was it? Yeah.
It might have been.
I don't know.
Yeah,
losing track.
But it's somewhere around there. We got a big one planned, so it's going to be epic. As epic in the traditional Saturday Night Movie Sleepover
make sure
sense.
You use the restroom before you start.
And we will make sure we do the same. And we have enough sleep and we have enough time to do everything. Please check us out on Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter.
Yes. CLNSmedia.com.
CLNSmedia.com. You can find us there. We're partnered with them. They're very good people at that place. You could find us on iTunes. We're on
Stitcher, iHeartRadio, however you're listening
Player
to us
FM,
right now.
However you're listening to us right now.
Dion Baia has a book called Blood in the Streets.
Available paperback, ebook, and audiobook. If you like 70s cop movies that we've been talking about, these genre pictures, gritty stuff, check it out. Good thriller, good detective novel, cop novel.
My books, Scored Death, Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers, is also available in paperback and ebook.
What the?
That I don't mention very often, but it is available on ebook. Or you can get it from me directly at scoredtodeath.com and follow my exploits, including... hopefully at some point Scored to Death the podcast will come back, but in the meantime you can listen to Cuts from the Crypt on the Damn Fine Network and follow Scored to Death at Scored to Death on social media.
Yeah, go check out our books. We like to say if you like to please support your local podcaster, go buy our stuff. That's a good way of supporting us. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. We're both right now writing our next stuff, so in a little while we'll have another book out for you to check out. But in the meantime, in 2 weeks, we'll have another movie coming down the pipeline. So we'll see you back here at same bat time, same bat channel. And remember, just take it easy.
Later.
The Old West. Now you can join in with Rawhide, the collector's edition, available for only $4.95 exclusively from Columbia House Video. Round up your first 2-hour, 2-episode volume. Saddle up with the legendary TV westerns that introduced the world to Clint Eastwood.
I'm warning you, boy. Don't make me capture play.
Rawhide, the heroic story of a brave band of riders led by Gil Favor, trail boss, and his trusted ramrod, Rowdy Yick.
You try to take him, you'll have more war than you can handle.
Ready for anything. Rustlers, renegades, storms, and stampedes. You never know what's waiting for you on the Rawhide Trail. To order, just call this toll-free number and enjoy complete uncut excitement. To get your first 2-hour, 2-episode video, call this toll-free number. Credit card orders only, please.
Kimberly Clark invites you to watch Steve McQueen in Wanted, Dead or Alive, Saturday nights over most of these same stations.
You can buy Autolite resistor spark plugs, Autolite stay full batteries, Autolite electrical parts at your neighborhood Autolite dealers. Switch to Autolite. Good night.
This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.